Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Chapter 1: Hidden Leaf Village, Ninja Academy. Yuru gazed out the window at the falling leaves. In his heart, he sighed, 12 years. It's been 12 years since I arrived in this world. I can't believe how fast time flies. Yuru was a transmigrant. The moment he was born, he encountered the chaos of the Nine Tails attack. His parents perished in the disaster. 6 years later, he successfully enrolled in the Ninja Academy. There was nothing special about him compared to other students. After entering the academy, his grades were average, his ranking unremarkable. The only thing worth mentioning was his decent looks. With his mediocre performance, Yuru was practically invisible in class. Nobody paid attention to him. He wasn't like Sasuke Uchiha, who aced every exam and ranked first. Nor was he like Naruto Uzumaki, who always drew attention for being dead last. Yuru had no fortuitous encounters and lived an ordinary 12 years. He displayed nothing extraordinary to catch the attention of the third Hokage or Danzō. Even Root never invited him for tea. AFK system activation successful. Binding to host, Yuru. Yuru froze for a moment. System. The AFK system, at your service. Yuru frowned, suspecting he was caught in a Genjutsu. He bit down hard on the back of his hand. The sharp pain confirmed he wasn't under Genjutsu. System, you're 12 years late. Yoru's tone was flat, devoid of emotion. He had already came to terms with life during these 12 years. Who would have thought the system would appear now? The AFK system didn't respond to his remark. What a cold and aloof system. Yuru thought. What he didn't know was that the AFK system had no emotions or intelligence to begin with. Seeing the system remain silent, Yuru didn't press further. So, what functions do you have? He asked. This system allows you to earn rewards simply by being AFK for a certain period of time. The system replied. Yuru chuckled. Quite simple, isn't it? So how do I use it? You are already using it. The AFK system is currently at work for you. Yuru was slightly surprised. I'm already using it? I wonder what rewards I'll get. Having lived through 12 years in this world, Yuru was well accustomed to it. Whether or not he had the AFK system didn't matter much to him. Without it, he would simply drift through life. With it, he'd live a bit more freely. That was the only difference. Shifting his focus from his mind space, he looked at Teruka, who was speaking at the podium. Graduation at last. I wonder which squad I'll be assigned to. The graduation exam was approaching. The test was on the clone jutsu. Although Yoru's grades over the past 6 years were average, passing wasn't an issue. He had already mastered the 3 basic jutsus. In fact, except for someone like Naruto, who was hindered by the Nine Tails, most students in the class had already mastered them by now. From the podium, Iruka called out, "Now, students whose names I call, head to the next room. First up, Sasuke Uchiha." Iruka called Sasuke first, as expected. From the moment they enrolled, Sasuke had always had the best grades in the class. His name was naturally at the top of the list. With an expressionless face, Sasuke stood up coolly, hands in his pockets, and walked toward the next room. The girls in the class all looked at Sasuke with starry eyes. Sasuke is so cool. Go, Sasuke. Sasuke, I love you. They were as infatuated with Sasuke as fans idolizing a celebrity. Naruto, sitting below, clenched his teeth as he watched the cool Sasuke on stage. Damn it, that bastard Sasuke. What's so great about him? Shikamaru, sitting not far from Naruto, lazily replied, Sasuke's been the top student in the class since day one, and he's always ranked first. Shikamaru, one day I'm going to surpass him. I'm going to be Hokage, believe it. Naruto declared. Shikamaru rolled his eyes and lay down on his desk to nap. In the class, only Shikamaru and Kiba hung out with Naruto. Everyone else stayed away from him, including Yuru. The others avoided Naruto due to their parents' influence, while Yuru simply didn't want any trouble. A few minutes later, Sasuke returned from the exam. As expected, he passed with ease. Iruka had even considered letting Sasuke pass without taking the test. Sasuke had mastered the 3 basic jutsus in his first year at the academy. To Iruka, Sasuke was undoubtedly the strongest student of their cohort. As Yuru anticipated, everyone except Naruto passed the exam smoothly. Afterward, the 3rd Hokage appeared and gave a speech to the graduating students. The talk filled the students, who had unrealistic dreams about the ninja profession, with even greater excitement about their upcoming careers. Naruto sat dejectedly on the swing under a tree, enviously watching his classmates celebrate their graduation. Before long, Naruto disappeared from under the tree. Yuru thought to himself, he must have been tricked by Mizuki. Yuru had no intention of getting involved in Naruto's theft of the scroll. On his way home from the ninja academy, he passed by a Kairaku Ramen. Not wanting to cook for himself, he decided to settle his dinner there. But as soon as he entered the ramen shop, he spotted Iruka treating Naruto to ramen. Having been in this world for 12 years, Yuru had forgotten many of the details. He didn't even recall that Iruka would treat Naruto to ramen at this moment. Just as Yuru was about to leave, the shop owner, Taki, called out to him. Yuru, what'll you have today? Yuru frequented a Kairaku Ramen more often than Naruto. Over the years, he'd gotten familiar with Taki. Taki's words caught the attention of Iruka and Naruto. Yuru had no choice but to step inside. Good evening, Iruka-sensei. Naruto, you're here for ramen too? Yoru's parents were both ninjas, and the money they left behind was enough to support him until adulthood. He usually avoided coming to the ramen shop at the same time as Naruto. In all these years, Yuru had never run into Naruto here before. Iruka smiled when he saw Yuru. Yuru, you did pretty well today. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't recognize Yuru. Yoru's presence in class was about as noticeable as she knows. Naruto had no memory of him and couldn't recall who he was at all. After sitting down, Yuru smiled slightly. It's all thanks to your excellent teaching, sensei. He spoke with a practiced politeness. Naruto frowned as he looked at Yuru. After thinking hard for a while, he still couldn't remember who Yuru was. Yuru didn't mind. Unable to remember, Naruto leaned toward Iruka and whispered, Iruka-sensei, who is he? Is he one of my classmates? Iruka, who had been about to say something to Yuru, was left speechless by Naruto's question. With a twitching mouth, he glanced at Naruto. Naruto, this is your classmate Yuru. You don't recognize him? Naruto scratched the back of his head awkwardly and laughed. Haha, Iruka-sensei, I honestly don't remember him. Naruto said this with complete sincerity. Chapter 2 Iruka awkwardly said to Yuru, don't mind him, Yuru. Naruto just has a bad memory. Even Iruka felt this excuse was flimsy. No matter how bad someone's memory was, it was impossible to forget a classmate of 6 years. To Iruka's surprise, Yuru didn't get upset. He smiled and said, it's alright. I'm just not very good at socializing. Don't say that. It's just that Naruto has an awful memory. Iruka said seriously. For the first time, Naruto began paying attention to Yuru. Iruka-sensei, did Yuru pass the graduation exam? Iruka turned to him and said with a sarcastic smile, of course he did. Naruto, you're the only one in the class who didn't pass. What exactly have you been learning these past years? Naruto scratched his head awkwardly. Iruka-sensei, I'm just not good at clone jutsu. But my sexy jutsu is great. Mentioning the sexy jutsu, Iruka's face turned bright red with anger. He shouted, don't bring up that vulgar technique. Naruto shrank back and muttered under his breath, but you had a nosebleed when you saw it. Shut up. Don't say another word. Being exposed like that, Iruka's face turned as red as a tomato. Yuru didn't mind any of this. He smiled and said to Taki, Uncle, 1 bowl of tonkatsu ramen, please. As he prepared the ramen, Taki chuckled and said, Yuru, you passed the Ninja Academy exam and are about to become a ninja. Let me add 2 extra eggs for you today. Taki and Yuru had a good relationship. Yuru smiled and replied, thank you, Uncle. At that moment, Aizen brought over a bowl of beef ramen and placed it in front of Yuru with a smile. Yuru, little brother, I'm so happy for you too. Because Yuru was good-looking, frequently visited a Kairaku Ramen, and was always polite, Aizen had a very good impression of him. By the time Iruka and Naruto finished their conversation, Yuru was almost done eating. Since Iruka and Naruto were there, Yuru ate much faster than usual. After finishing, Yuru stood up and said, Iruka-sensei, Naruto, enjoy your meal. I'll be heading out now. Iruka was momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected Yuru to finish so quickly. Glancing at Naruto, he realized why. But he didn't blame Yuru. After all, Yoru's parents had died during the Nine Tails incident. It was natural for him to dislike Naruto. Naruto, oblivious to everything, laughed heartily and waved. Goodbye, Yuru. Let's hang out sometime. Yuru gave a faint smile but didn't respond, walking away quietly. His demeanor was polite yet distant. Naruto didn't notice, but Hiruka did. He is already much better than others. At least he doesn't show obvious disdain for Naruto in his eyes. What Hiruka didn't know was that Yuru kept his distance from Naruto purely because he didn't want any trouble. When Yuru returned home, he lay on his bed, closed his eyes, and wondered when the reward would arrive. Was the idol system real? It wasn't until midnight that he finally heard the voice of the system in his mind. You've been idle for 1 day. Congratulations, you've unlocked your chakra limit. Yuru frowned, unsure what the reward meant. Suddenly, he felt a faint blue light envelop his body. At that moment, Yuru, who had already extracted his chakra, recognized that the blue glow surrounding him was chakra itself. He was utterly shocked by the density of this chakra. It was so concentrated that it had become tangible. This chakra is so rich. It's at least 100 times more than what I had before. Yuru thought. Is this my reward? In the next instant, the chakra surged wildly into Yoru's body. At that moment, he felt an overwhelming comfort, so intense that he almost cried out. If not for biting down on his blanket, the neighbors might have misunderstood what he was doing late at night. It took a long time for Yuru to fully absorb all the chakra. This is incredible. I can actually absorb chakra from the outside world. He marveled. Normally, a ninja's chakra is extracted from their cells. That had also been Yoru's method up until now. Previously, he had always worried that extracting chakra would weaken his body. In reality, he had overthought it. This world operated differently from the one he was familiar with, and many rules from his old world didn't apply here. In this world, extracting chakra didn't harm the body unless done excessively. However, the amount of chakra one could extract from their body was greatly influenced by their physical constitution. Simply put, those from ninja clans often had far superior constitutions compared to ordinary ninjas, resulting in much larger chakra reserves. Before this, Yoru's chakra reserves had always been average because his parents were civilian ninjas. His chakra reserves couldn't even compare to Sasuke's, they were about 10 times smaller. When compared to Naruto, the gap was astronomical, thousands of times smaller, even without factoring in the Nine-Tails chakra. Naruto's chakra reserves from his Uzumaki lineage alone were already vast. Moreover, as Naruto aged, his chakra reserves would only grow larger, further widening the gap between them. In this world, bloodline heritage was incredibly important. Without a strong bloodline, one could only achieve fleeting greatness, like Guy. Now, however, Yuru felt that his chakra reserves had increased 100-fold, reaching the level of a Jonin. What's more, he could absorb chakra from the environment. This meant he could replenish his chakra anywhere, anytime, a feat most ninjas couldn't achieve. The energy in nature was vastly greater than the chakra within Yoru's body. At this moment, he sensed that energy from the outside world was continuously flowing into him, and its quality was exceptionally high. What Yuru didn't realize was that the chakra he was absorbing from the environment was natural energy. Its quality far exceeded that of ordinary chakra. In addition to being useful in combat, natural energy also nourished the body. Yoru's physical condition wasn't particularly great, which limited how much chakra he could absorb. If he had a body like Naruto's, his chakra reserves would already surpass Naruto's by 100-fold. Right now, Yuru simply felt that his body was incredibly comfortable, even more so than soaking in a hot spring. This system is amazing. It's only the first day, and it's already given me such a huge surprise. Yuru thought. Too bad I don't know any ninjutsu aside from the 3 basic jutsus. Yoru's parents hadn't left him any ninjutsu scrolls. They weren't high-ranking ninjas, both were just ordinary chunin. I'll take it slow. Maybe the idol system will provide something in the future. Having my chakra reserves increase 100-fold is already fantastic. Now, my chakra reserves far surpass Sasuke's. Sasuke's chakra reserves were already abundant, far greater than those of most students. However, compared to Naruto, they were still lacking. But then again, anyone compared to Naruto would seem lacking in chakra reserves. The Uchiha clan was also known for their large chakra reserves, though they still fell short compared to the Uzumaki and Senju clans. After all, without sufficient chakra, even activating the Sharingan would be difficult, let alone using the Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 3. The next day, Yuru arrived at school. As soon as he entered the classroom, he noticed Naruto was already there. Yesterday, Naruto had finally remembered who Yuru was. Unlike Shino, Yuru didn't keep himself wrapped up or deliberately hidden. Previously, people hadn't paid much attention to him because he didn't participate in many activities or play with his classmates. He would simply go straight home as soon as class ended. When Naruto saw Yuru, he stood up and waved enthusiastically. Yo, Yuru. Yuru was slightly surprised but responded with a polite smile and a nod before casually finding a seat. Naruto's enthusiastic greeting drew the attention of many classmates. Though he was often considered the class clown, Naruto always had a knack for attracting attention. Many students turned to look in Yoru's direction. Several of the girls froze when they saw him. "I never noticed before, but he's as handsome as Sasuke." One whispered. "No way, Sasuke is the best. No one compares to him." "But Yuru is really good looking, too," another added. The girls began debating who was more attractive, Yuru or Sasuke. Most still favored Sasuke, not necessarily for his looks but for his overall strength and abilities. However, some girls decided to seize the opportunity to get to know Yuru first. One such girl was Ino Yamanaka. Being a self-proclaimed admirer of good looks, Ino's affection for Sasuke had largely been driven by his appearance. Now, spotting a boy whose looks rivaled Sasuke's, she wasn't about to let the chance slip away. Ino approached Yuru, her cheeks flushed red. "Hi, I'm Ino Yamanaka. I don't know how I never noticed you before." Yuru furrowed his brow slightly, internally questioning himself. Was I really that invisible before? He wondered. Sure, I didn't want to stand out, but to the point where they act like I never existed? This is ridiculous. Feeling somewhat exasperated, Yuru reassured himself that he wasn't trying to isolate himself entirely, he simply disliked unnecessary trouble. Still, it amazed him how his classmates seemed to have no impression of him after 6 years of being in the same class. 6 years of attending the same school, and all he got was, "I don't remember seeing you before." Looking at the blushing and shy Ino, Yuru offered a polite smile. "I'm Yuru. Nice to meet you." His playful response left Ino flustered. Sorry, Yuru." She stammered awkwardly. Yuru, however, wasn't truly upset. He had only meant to tease her. Besides, this misunderstanding was partly his fault for keeping such a low profile. "It's fine. Let's just consider this our first meeting." Yuru replied with a gentle smile. Ino's heart pounded furiously at his smile, and she nearly fainted on the spot. The girls in this world had a tendency to overreact, heart palpitations could genuinely knock them unconscious. At that moment, Shikamaru strolled over lazily. "You were always too focused on Sasuke. It's no wonder you didn't notice Yuru," Shikamaru remarked casually. He sat down next to Yuru. "Hey. I noticed you usually leave right after class, so we never got a chance to talk. I'm Shikamaru." He extended a hand toward Yuru. Yuru was a little surprised that Shikamaru had been paying attention to him. "Oh, I'm Yuru," he replied, shaking Shikamaru's hand. Given Shikamaru's intelligence, it made sense that he had observed Yuru, even if others hadn't. When Yoru's presence registered, it became clear that, in terms of appearance, only Sasuke could rival him in the class. After a few casual exchanges, Sasuke entered the room. As soon as he arrived, all the girls' attention shifted to him. "Ah, Sasuke. So handsome." A throng of girls surged toward him. Shikamaru slumped onto his desk, sighing. Women are such a hassle. No sooner had he spoken than Ino, leaning over Yuru, shot him a glare. "What did you say, Shikamaru?" Shikamaru turned his head, surprised that Ino hadn't joined the crowd around Sasuke. "I wasn't talking about you." Ino rolled her eyes at him. Humphrey. Although Ino glanced at Sasuke a few times, her focus was mostly on Yuru. Sasuke had always monopolized her attention, preventing her from noticing Yuru before. But now that she had, she realized no one seemed to hover around Yuru. And his looks were no less impressive than Sasuke's. Naturally, Ino knew how to make a choice. While Sasuke was great, the competition for him was overwhelming, especially with Sakura in the mix. In just an instant, Ino weighed her options and made her decision. Meanwhile, Naruto noticed Sakura squeezing herself next to Sasuke, her infatuated expression clear as day. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Naruto muttered, "Damn it, Sakura only has eyes for Sasuke. That bastard. I won't let him have her." With that, Naruto stormed toward Sasuke. His bold actions caught the attention of the entire class, even Yuru. Naruto leapt onto Sasuke's desk, crouching and glaring directly at him. Sasuke, unwilling to back down, stared daggers right back. The girls around them were outraged at Naruto's behavior. "You idiot, Naruto. Don't glare at Sasuke like that. Naruto, get down. How dare you look at Sasuke that way?" Yuru watched the scene unfold with a strange sense of familiarity. He couldn't quite place it, but something told him the situation was about to take a bizarre turn. Sure enough, the next moment, someone accidentally bumped Naruto's rear with an elbow. Losing his balance, Naruto toppled forward, straight onto Sasuke. What happened next left Yuru stunned. The girls around them screamed in horror. Naruto, you idiot. What are you doing? How could you? Sasuke's first kiss, it's gone. You jerk. Yoru's eyes widened in shock, his mouth twitching slightly. What? These two. Their relationship must be really close, huh? Even Shikamaru shook his head in exasperation. Naruto's such an idiot. Ino, wearing a similar expression to Yoru, muttered, those two. That was probably their first kiss, right? Previously, Ino might have been furious over such an incident. But now, she felt no such anger. Unlike Sakura, who genuinely adored Sasuke, Ino's interest in him stemmed partly from her rivalry with Sakura and partly from his looks. Her ability to shift her affections quickly made this situation less impactful for her. The scene between Naruto and Sasuke, however, was one Yoru knew he would never forget. Dark thoughts crossed his mind. Is the reason Naruto keeps chasing Sasuke later on because there's something special between them? The thought sent a chill down his spine. That's ridiculous. I need to stop overthinking this, it's terrifying. Meanwhile, both Sasuke and Naruto were gagging, visibly repulsed by the incident. Sasuke glared at Naruto in disgust. Naruto, you idiot. What are you trying to do? Naruto snapped back, equally enraged. I should be asking you, you bastard. What are you trying to do? The two immediately started bickering. Sakura had no choice but to step in, pulling them apart. To prevent further arguments, she seated herself between the two of them. From that moment on, Sakura became the mediator in their turbulent relationship. Chapter 4. This scene was also observed by the Jonin gathered in the Hokage's office, all staring at the third Hokage's crystal ball with dark expressions. Asuma Sarutobi commented, so, this is Sasuke Uchiha, the top student of this generation. Judging by his grades, he's outstanding, on par with Kakashi in his youth. Kakashi, who had been silently watching the crystal ball, remarked indifferently, perhaps even stronger than I was back then. In his mind, he thought, after all, he's an Uchiha. The Uchiha clan held a significant place in Kakashi's heart. His close friend and a former subordinate were both from the Uchiha clan. He had witnessed the power of the Uchiha firsthand. The third Hokage, watching the scene, couldn't help but feel exasperated. He sighed inwardly, Naruto, that kid, always causing such unexpected situations. What a handful. None of them paid any attention to Yoru. Over the years, Yoru's grades had been average, not outstanding but not terrible either. Even the third Hokage didn't have any particular impression of him. It wasn't surprising, as Yuru had always come across as an ordinary student. With no special traits or a notable family background, he naturally went unnoticed. After a while, Iruka entered the classroom. Standing at the front, he pulled out the team assignment list, glancing at the students, who were all watching him with nervous anticipation. Sitting beside Yoru, Ino silently prayed, please let me be in the same team as Yoru. What she didn't know was that her fate had long been decided by the third Hokage and her elders. The Inoshikacho formation was never meant to be broken. In fact, the teams of the Hidden Leaf Village 12 had all been meticulously arranged in advance. There was no room for unexpected pairings. Sure enough, Iruka called out several team assignments, none of which included Yoru. When he reached Team 10, Iruka announced, Team 10, Nara Shikamaru, Okimeki Choji, and Yamanaka Ino. As Yoru expected, the trio was set in stone. Even though many details had faded from his memory, after living in Hidden Leaf Village for over a decade, he had a clear understanding of the village's major clans. There's no way the Inoshikacho trio would be split up, he thought. Ino slumped onto her desk, visibly disappointed. Ugh, this team assignment is terrible. I didn't even get placed in the same team as Yoru. Beside her, Shikamaru sighed in exasperation. Hey, can you not say that right in front of us? We're your teammates, you know. Ino huffed and turned to glance at Yoru, noticing how calm he was. It seemed he had expected this outcome all along. Dejected, she said, Yoru, we're not in the same team. Yoru smiled and replied, I'm sure the teachers have their reasons. Iruka continued, Team 11, Yamada Jumoku, Jingwen Yoru, and Hanyataka. Yoru thought to himself, as expected, my teammates are two completely unknown students. Team 11 consisted of 3 students from civilian backgrounds. Yoru was certain their instructor wouldn't be one of Hidden Leaf Village's renowned Jonin. Most likely, it would be an ordinary Jonin, or perhaps even a special Jonin or a Chunin. Meanwhile, Yoru's 2 unfamiliar teammates were already scurrying around the classroom, searching for him. Yamada Jumoku was a boy with a personality similar to Naruto's. Oddly enough, he sported a ponytail. Hanyataka. It turned out one of them was a rather attractive girl. She had long golden hair that flowed down to her waist, dressed in a simple white top and a pure black skirt with no patterns. Her appearance was calm and quiet. Yuru had never paid attention to these two before. Similarly, Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka didn't have any impression of Yuru either. However, the two seemed to get along well with each other. To them, Yuru was practically a stranger. Once the team assignments were complete, the instructors for each group began arriving to collect their students. The first to arrive was Azuma. He entered the room and looked directly at Shikamaru and his teammates. "Students of Team 10, I'm your instructor Jonin. Follow me." Azuma prepared to leave, she turned to Yuru with visible reluctance. "Yuru, my family's flower shop is on Commercial Street. I usually help out there. You must come visit me sometime." Yuru nodded slightly. He knew that if he didn't agree, Ino would probably refuse to leave. Shikamaru added, "Yuru, we're off then." Yuru smiled. "Alright, you guys go ahead." After the three left, Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka moved to sit beside Yuru. Jumoku, with his cheerful personality, immediately extended his hand toward Yuru, grinning. "Hello, Yuru. I'm Yamada Jumoku. We're in the same team now, so let's get along." Yuru smiled back. "Hello, Jumoku. I'm Yuru. Let's get along." Then Hanyataka introduced herself with equal enthusiasm, extending her hand. "I'm Hanyataka. Let's work well together." Yuru lightly shook her hand and smiled. "Yataka, let's do our best." And just like that, the three became acquainted. As they shook hands, Yuru subtly sensed their chakra levels, realizing that neither of them had much, just about average gain in levels. This was one of the natural abilities he had gained, allowing him to be especially sensitive to energy, including chakra and impending danger. From this brief interaction, Yuru formed a preliminary understanding of his teammates. He didn't dislike them, both had pleasant personalities. Jumoku's personality was similar to Naruto's but less over the top, just cheerful and outgoing. Meanwhile, Yataka's personality resembled Hinata's but was less shy, more composed and serene. In terms of appearance, Yataka was no less attractive than Hinata. Her sense of fashion, however, was far superior. From her attire, it was evident that Yataka, though not from a ninja clan, came from a wealthy family. Her clothes looked expensive, hinting that she was likely a little rich girl. Both Yataka and Jumoku were curious about Yuru, someone they had no prior impression of. Unable to hold back, Jumoku asked, "Yuru, how come I don't remember seeing you before? Are you a transfer student?" Yataka also looked at Yuru with curiosity. Yuru sighed inwardly. It seemed that, apart from Shikamaru, almost no one in their class knew him. With patience, he replied, "I've been in this class for 6 years." Jumoku froze. You've been in this class for 6 years? He couldn't believe that after all this time, he had absolutely no memory of Yuru. Yataka covered her mouth in shock, equally surprised. Yuru smiled bitterly. "Maybe it's because I'm not very sociable." Jumoku nodded, seemingly in agreement. "That makes sense. I don't have any memory of you. So strange. But from now on, we're teammates. We won't let you be alone anymore," Jumoku said with a bright smile. Yuru was slightly taken aback. It seems it's not just the main characters who are this warm and friendly. These supporting characters are quite nice too. The only problem is their lack of strength, relegating them to the background. The unlucky ones might die during the Fourth Great Ninja War. The even unluckier ones might not even make it that far, perishing on some random mission instead. Chapter 5. Just as Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka finished speaking, a man in his 40s entered the classroom. His imposing and muscular frame made him look more like a warrior than a ninja. The intense and menacing aura emanating from him immediately silenced the once bustling classroom. He walked to the podium, scanned the room briefly, and quickly fixed his gaze on Yura and his teammates. "Team 11, follow me outside." His words were concise and direct. This man was Yura and his teammates' assigned instructor. Without waiting for a response, the ninja turned and left the classroom. Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka were visibly shaken. "Why does our teacher look so terrifying?" Jumoku muttered nervously. Yataka also looked worried. "It seems like we're in for a rough time." Yuru, however, remained indifferent. "This guy's aura is strong, and there's a heavy scent of blood on him," he thought. "He must have been part of Anbu or some similar division in the past. That's probably a good thing, it means he's skilled." While not all Anbu members were Jonin, those who qualified, even as Chunin, were among the elite of their rank. "Let's go. If we don't follow, we won't know where he's headed," Yuru reminded the pair. After they left, Naruto, who had been sitting at the back of the classroom, finally exhaled a sigh of relief. That was scary. Poor Yuru, his instructor looks like trouble. Let's observe a moment of silence for his ninja career. Naruto added dramatically. Sakura, sitting nearby, nodded nervously. Who is that teacher? He feels like someone who's about to kill. Only Sasuke seemed pensive. That ninja's aura is similar to that man's. Sasuke murmured to himself, he's probably from Anbu. Compared to Naruto and Sakura, Sasuke had seen more of the world. The instructor's presence reminded him of his brother, Itachi Uchiha. Outside the classroom, Yuru and his teammates quickly caught up with their instructor. From then on, the four walked in silence. Jumoku and Yutaka were too intimidated by the instructor's aura to speak. Yuru, on the other hand, simply wasn't the talkative type. Their instructor remained silent as well. The group walked quietly out of the ninja academy and arrived at one of Hidden Leaf Village's many training grounds. Hidden Leaf Village's training grounds were vast, with the most famous being the Forest of Death, which had a diameter of 20 kilometers. Standing in front of their instructor, Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka couldn't help but tremble slightly, while Yoru remained calm. The instructor's eyes scanned the three, eventually landing on Yoru. Yoru suddenly felt a heavy, oppressive force weighing down on him. It was a deeply uncomfortable sensation, one he immediately recognized. This was the instructor's attempt to intimidate them using his killing intent. Despite the pressure, Yoru had no intention of yielding. Even as his mind wavered slightly, his expression remained calm. Under this terrifying aura, Yoru's composure was remarkable. He appeared entirely unaffected. The instructor was visibly surprised. Interesting kid. His intimidation had failed to faze Yoru, piquing his interest. After all, Yoru was just a freshly graduated student from the academy. Yet, under this level of pressure, enough to make most Chunin falter, he remained completely unshaken. Ha ha ha. Kid, you've really caught my attention. Oh, I thought I was just getting a group of inexperienced kids, but it seems there's someone as interesting as you. The instructor finally spoke. Meanwhile, the residual pressure from his intimidation had left Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka pale and trembling, their consciousnesses barely intact. After all, this instructor was a former member of Anbu, and his aura carried a murderous intensity. Yoru lifted his gaze and calmly said, Sensei, I don't think you should be using such violent methods on a group of student ninjas. Although Yoru had withstood the instructor's oppressive aura, it didn't mean he wasn't affected. For a brief moment, even his own mind had faltered. If it hadn't been for the reward from the night before that greatly enhanced his mental and physical strength, he would have been in the same state as Jumoku and Yutaka, completely overwhelmed. The instructor was momentarily stunned by Yoru's boldness, but after a second, he sighed and waved it off. Fine, fine. I told them I'm not suited to teach kids like you. He smirked. If it were before, a brat talking back to me like that would have earned a good beating. Kid, your name's Yoru, right? Seems the Academy's assessment of you wasn't accurate at all. You're anything but ordinary. He said with a chuckle. Once the oppressive aura dissipated, Jumoku and Yutaka finally started to recover, though their fear of the instructor lingered in their eyes. They had never encountered anything so terrifying before, and now they looked at Yoru in a new light. How could he remain so composed under such a terrifying presence? Initially, they thought Yoru was just like them, but now they realized how vast the gap between them truly was. What they didn't know was that the majority of the instructor's aura had been directed at Yoru. If they had known, their shock would have been even greater. Even the lingering pressure had nearly caused them to lose consciousness. It was unimaginable how powerful Yoru had to be to withstand the full brunt of it. Yoru didn't deny the instructor's observation. Offering an explanation felt unnecessary and forced. The instructor didn't dwell on the matter either and seemed quite pleased. Alright, let me introduce myself. My name is Kion Toichi. You can call me Sensei Toichi. What I just did was a little test for you, and you did well, especially you, Yoru. Toichi said, his satisfaction evident. Now, it's your turn to introduce yourselves. Yamada Jumoku eagerly raised his hand and exclaimed, Sensei, Sensei. My name is Yamada Jumoku. My favorite food is grilled meat, and I hate green peppers. My dream is to become the strongest ninja in the world and the greatest Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village. Jumoku's enthusiasm and ambition were reminiscent of Naruto. Even their dreams were strikingly similar. But then again, the dream of becoming Hokage was common among most kids in Hidden Leaf Village. Toichi smiled. Well, you'll have to work hard for that. There are many powerful ninjas in this world. To become the strongest, you'll need to put in effort beyond everyone else's. At that moment, Toichi's intimidating aura had vanished, replaced by an approachable demeanor. Even so, Hanyataka couldn't forget the fear he had instilled in her earlier. With a trembling voice, she said, My name is Hanyataka. I'm 12 years old. Her voice was so faint it was almost inaudible. Her delicate, Doll-like features and waist-length golden hair gave her a striking beauty that made her even more endearing. Even Yuru found himself momentarily captivated. Such a beautiful girl, yet she's never been mentioned. I wonder on what mission she'll eventually perish. Yuru thought with a frown. Both Jumoku and Yutaka had left a good impression on him. Though they had only just met, Yuru already felt a sense of acceptance toward them. I wonder if my presence here will change their fates? When it was Yoru's turn, he calmly said, "My name is Yuru Kagefumi. My dream is to become an excellent ninja." He gave a simple and ordinary answer because, in truth, he didn't have a grand dream. Before gaining the system, he had none, and even afterward, nothing had changed. Chapter 6. After the three introduced themselves, Kiyotoichi smiled and said, "Alright, that's it for today. Meet here tomorrow morning, and I'll take you to receive your first mission." Before they could respond, he vanished, leaving Yamada Jumoku and Hanyataka stunned. They stared at the now empty spot with blank expressions. Yoru sighed, shaking his head. "Looks like this teacher isn't very reliable." "Jumoku, Yutaka, see you tomorrow then." With Kiyotoichi gone, Yoru didn't feel like staying either. However, just as he turned to leave, Yamada Jumoku called out to him. "Wait, Yoru. Today's our graduation day and the first day of our team. Shouldn't we celebrate?" Before Yoru could answer, Hanyataka chimed in, "Yes. Let's go for a barbecue. My treat, how about that? Yoru, we haven't really gotten to know you yet," she added, blinking her beautiful eyes at him. Yoru felt it hard to refuse. Well, in that case, thank you, Yutaka," he said awkwardly. Though he suspected Hanyataka was quite wealthy, it still felt a little inappropriate to let her treat them. After all, barbecue wasn't cheap in Hidden Leaf Village, it was far pricier than ramen. Jumoku laughed and said, "Yoru, don't feel bad. Yutaka's father is one of Hidden Leaf Village's richest men. Her monthly allowance is equal to the reward for a B-rank mission. Jumoku, if you keep saying that, I'll make you pay for everything yourself," Yutaka retorted, clearly annoyed at the mention of her wealth. Jumoku grinned, alright, I won't say it anymore. "Well, Yoru, what do you think? Want to come?" Yoru was surprised to learn just how wealthy Hanyataka was. He had guessed her family was well off but hadn't expected this level of affluence. A B-rank mission reward ranged from 80,000 to 200,000 ryo. Even at the minimum, her monthly allowance was enough to buy over 1,000 bowls of Ikiraku ramen. In contrast, Yoru's monthly living expenses were only 5,000 ryo, which already provided him a comfortable lifestyle. Yutaka's allowance was at least 16 times his living expenses. Yoru's lips twitched slightly as he thought, the wealth gap really is massive. With someone offering barbecue, Yoru had no reason to refuse. "Alright, let's go," he said with a smile. They headed to Hidden Leaf Village's most famous barbecue restaurant, a popular gathering spot for ninjas. As soon as they entered, a voice called out, "Yoru, over here." Turning toward the voice, Yoru saw that Ino and her team were also there. Yoru glanced at Hanyataka, seeking her opinion. She smiled and said, "Yoru, you seem to have a good relationship with Ino. We just met today." Yoru replied flatly, unsure what Yutaka's comment meant. Beside him, Jumoku shivered slightly. Is Yutaka jealous? He wondered. While Yoru didn't understand Yutaka well, Jumoku did. Though Yutaka appeared gentle, she often had a sly, sarcastic streak. Yutaka smiled again after hearing Yoru's answer. "Let's join them, then." Yoru had no objections, but Jumoku sensed trouble brewing. "I hope this barbecue goes smoothly. Though that seems unlikely," Jumoku thought grimly. The three approached Ino's group, which included Shikamaru, Choji, and their instructor, Asuma Saratobi. When Yoru arrived near Ino, Yutaka immediately sat between him and Ino, smiling. "Ino, I didn't expect to see you here." Ino glanced at Yutaka. The two got along fairly well in the academy since Yutaka was one of the few girls not obsessed with Sasuke, leaving no room for competition. Moreover, despite not being from a ninja clan, Yutaka's family was well known and wealthy, which fostered a cordial relationship between them. However, today, Ino felt Yutaka was acting a bit differently. Shikamaru and Jumoku seemed to notice as well, but Yoru didn't. Asuma introduced himself, and the three students stood up respectfully. "Asuma-sensei." They greeted in unison. Asuma waved his hand modestly. "No need for such formality. Sit down, sit down." After they sat, Asuma looked at Shikamaru's group. "You see how polite they are? You could learn from them." But Shikamaru and his teammates weren't paying attention. Coming from prominent ninja families, they respected Asuma but saw no need for excessive politeness. Ino ignored Asuma and instead focused on Yoru. "Yoru, why are you guys done so early?" Didn't your instructor give you a test? She asked, leaning slightly to speak past Yutaka. Yutaka's displeasure was subtle but noticeable to those paying attention. The others turned to Yuru, curious as well. After all newly graduated teams needed to pass their instructor's evaluation. Failing it could mean being sent back to the academy for retraining. Our instructor's test was straightforward, so it didn't take long. Yuru explained. Before he could elaborate, Jumoku interjected, not at all. Our teacher's test was terrifying, Yutaka and I almost died. Recalling Kion Toichi's evaluation, Jumoku shivered. The experience had been so overwhelming he'd almost wished for death. Jumoku's words piqued the others' curiosity. Asuma furrowed his brows. Who is your instructor? His name is Kion Toichi. Jumoku replied. Asuma paused, frowning in thought. He couldn't recall anyone in Hidden Leaf Village by that name. Kion Toichi? I don't remember any ninja in Hidden Leaf Village with that name. He muttered. Chapter 7 Yamada Jumoku asked curiously, even Asuma-sensei doesn't know? Could it be that our sensei is a complete nobody? Yamada Jumoku looked a bit disappointed. After all, he thought that Kion Toichi seemed to possess formidable strength and should be a very powerful shinobi. Noticing Yamada Jumoku's mood, Asuma quickly said, that shouldn't be the case. As far as I know, every instructor who leads a team of genin is at least a jonin. Your sensei must be as well. It's just that I don't know every shinobi in the Hidden Leaf Village. Hearing this, Yamada Jumoku felt less disappointed. Even though he had been quite intimidated by Kion Toichi during their earlier test, he was still glad to have such a powerful shinobi as their teacher. To Yamada Jumoku, having a strong teacher meant he could become a strong shinobi faster. At that moment, Shikamaru asked, you mentioned earlier that your sensei's test almost got you killed. What exactly happened? Shikamaru was curious. After all, it was just a test, how could it have been that extreme? Asuma also looked toward Yamada Jumoku. He didn't approve of overly harsh methods being used on students. Even Kakashi wouldn't put his students in genuine danger. Asuma was worried that Kion Toichi had used brutal tactics on his students. Such things had happened before, but they were strictly forbidden in the Hidden Leaf Village. Yamada Jumoku glanced at Yorua and said, it wasn't anything too special, really. It's just that our sensei seemed to use some kind of ganjutsu on us, and it nearly broke our spirits. If not for Yorua, both Tanako and I might have actually died. Yamada Jumoku now realized that during Kion Toichi's test, most of the oppressive pressure had been aimed at Yorua. Otherwise, Kion Toichi wouldn't have treated Yorua differently afterward. It seemed that the majority of the pressure back then had been directed at Yorua, while he and Tanako had only endured a fraction of it. Yorua was just about to pop a piece of grilled meat into his mouth when he suddenly noticed Asuma, Shikamaru, and Ino all staring at him. Yorua blinked in confusion. What's wrong? While Yamada Jumoku had been talking with Asuma and Shikamaru, Yorua hadn't been paying attention at all. For him, the array of grilled meats on the table was far more enticing. Having lived in this world for 12 years, Yorua hadn't made many friends. Most of his time was spent either training or enjoying all kinds of delicious food. Noticing their gazes, Yorua was puzzled. Asuma, on the other hand, was even more intrigued. He had reviewed Yorua's records before and knew that Yorua hadn't stood out at the Ninja Academy. But from the way Yamada Jumoku described him, he seemed to be quite capable. Asuma thought for a moment and asked Yamada Jumoku, what did it feel like when your sensei used ganjutsu on you? Yamada Jumoku pondered for a bit and then said, it felt like I was trapped in a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, with countless shinobi charging at me. It felt like I got stabbed dozens of times, and I couldn't escape that setting at all. After Yamada Jumoku finished speaking, Tanako shrank back in fear, clearly still haunted by the experience. Kion Toichi's oppressive pressure had left a deep scar on her mind. She would probably never forget it for the rest of her life. Based on Yamada Jumoku's description, Asuma could roughly guess what kind of ganjutsu Kion Toichi had used. And he could also roughly deduce Kion Toichi's identity. No wonder I haven't heard of him. Asuma muttered. I'd bet he came from the Anbu. The Anbu? Aside from Yorua, everyone else looked at Asuma in confusion. Taking a puff of his cigarette, Asuma explained slowly, yeah, the Anbu. It's a special division in the Hidden Leaf Village, a group that protects the village from the shadows. It's made up of highly skilled shinobi. This was the first time most of them, including Shikamaru, had heard of the Anbu. Even though Shikamaru came from a prominent family, he had never paid attention to such matters. Shikamaru shot a deep look at Yorua. From Asuma's description, Shikamaru could sense the caliber of the Anbu. The fact that Yorua had been able to withstand the mental pressure of such a shinobi was remarkable. Asuma thought the same as he looked at Yorua, who was still focused on eating grilled meat. While the others had stopped eating, Yuru remained entirely absorbed in his food. Asuma knew better than anyone how formidable Anbu Jonin were. For Yuru to endure their mental pressure and come out seemingly unscathed was proof of something extraordinary. Meanwhile, Yamada Jumoku, oblivious to Shikamaru and Asuma's expressions, was completely shocked by Asuma's words. The Anbu? It sounds like Kion-sensei must be incredibly strong. Yamada Jumoku said in awe. That's our sensei for you. What Yamada Jumoku cared about most was whether Kion Toichi could teach him powerful jutsu and make him a strong shinobi. And for that to happen, Kion Toichi needed to be exceptionally skilled. Shikamaru glanced at Asuma. Asuma shook his head, signaling not to probe Yuru further. Understanding his sensei's cue, Shikamaru decided against asking any more questions. Asuma also refrained from delving further into Yamada Jumoku's test story. Still, he made a mental note to discuss this matter with Kakashi later. Again and fresh out of the academy, able to endure an Anbu Jonin's Ganjutsu? That was highly unusual. Especially considering Yoru's otherwise average performance at the academy. Could it simply be that his mental fortitude was exceptionally strong? Asuma knew he'd have to look into it. Yoru, unaware of Asuma's thoughts, wouldn't have cared even if he knew. He didn't think he had done anything extraordinary. It was just that his mental energy was slightly above average. After finishing their meal, Yuru became better acquainted with Team 10 and his own teammates, Yamada Jumoku and Tanako. When it was time to head home, Yamada Jumoku said to Yuru, "Our houses are in different directions, so why don't you walk Tanako home?" Without giving Yuru a chance to refuse, he darted off. Yuru was left stunned. Meanwhile, Tanako's pale cheeks turned bright red. Yuru frowned slightly. What's with that guy? He thought Yamada Jumoku might have some urgent matter at home. Tanako, too embarrassed to look up, shyly stared at the ground, kicking at it with her foot and remaining silent. Glancing at Tanako, Yuru smiled. "I'll walk you home." After all, it was night time. Even though Tanako had graduated from the academy and was technically a shinobi, she was still a young girl from a prominent family. There was always the risk of someone targeting her. Tanako nodded bashfully. She had harbored a crush on Yuru ever since witnessing him fearlessly endure Kion Toichi's oppressive pressure during the test. Moreover, Yuru was undeniably good-looking. At their age, it was natural to start developing feelings for the opposite sex. Yuru, however, didn't see Tanako as a peer. Instead, he viewed her as a kid. Although there were moments when he thought Tanako was pretty, he regarded her more like a younger sister. Walking down the brightly lit streets side by side, Yuru and Tanako looked like a perfect pair to passers-by. Their striking looks even turned a few heads. Some people assumed they were a couple. In this world, it wasn't uncommon for people to mature early. Relationships often started at their age. With Tanako's shy demeanor and flushed face, it was hard not to misunderstand. Chapter 8. The two walked for a while before Tanako mustered the courage to speak to Yuru. "Yuru, what do you think about Ino?" Yuru paused, looking at Tanako with curiosity. Why would she ask such a question? What about her? Tanako's face turned as red as if she were running a fever, but she still managed to voice the question that had been on her mind. "Do you think she's pretty? And since she's a girl from the Yamanaka clan, you boys must like girls like her, right?" In truth, Tanako was more attractive than Ino and had a quieter, gentler demeanor, which was often more appealing to boys. However, Yuru didn't understand the purpose behind Tanako's question. He had always assumed that Yamada Jumoku and Tanako shared a special bond. The only reason he was walking her home today was because Yamada Jumoku had claimed he had an urgent matter. Yuru thought for a moment and replied, "Ino? Yeah, she's pretty." Tanako suddenly grew anxious and turned to look at Yuru. Then, "Do you like her?" Yuru froze for a moment before replying, "We're friends, of course I like her." "I don't mean as a friend. I mean, do you like her as in liking her romantically?" Tanako asked nervously. "Definitely not," Yuru said. "We just met today." "Why do you ask?" Yoru's curiosity was piqued as he looked at Tanako. Hearing his answer, Tanako let out a sigh of relief and smiled. "Because I think she acted a bit differently toward you today compared to other boys. I could tell, it seemed like she had a crush on you." Yuru chuckled. "You're overthinking it. Ino acts that way toward any boy she finds good-looking." Tanako was momentarily taken aback. She hadn't expected Yuru to crack a joke. She patted Yoru's shoulder playfully and said, "So, you're saying you think you're good-looking?" Yuru laughed. "Am I not?" "You are," Tanako admitted with a smile. The two locked eyes and burst out laughing. Under the streetlights, their playful interaction would have easily led any onlooker to misunderstand the nature of their relationship. At that moment, their bond undoubtedly grew stronger. To Yuru, Tanako was someone he could joke around with. And to Tanako, she saw a new side of Yuru. He wasn't as distant and unapproachable as he seemed on the surface. As they chatted and laughed, they soon arrived at the gates of Tanako's home. Looking at the grand estate before him, Yuru teased, "Wow, talk about a mansion. I guess Jumoka wasn't exaggerating. Tanako, your family really is loaded." In the prime, expensive real estate of the Hidden Leaf Village, her home resembled a large manor, far beyond what most could afford. It was clear her family was exceptionally wealthy. The Hidden Leaf Village wasn't just home to shinobi, it also had many ordinary residents. After all, shinobi weren't engaged in production or trade. The village relied on ordinary people to sustain its economy and infrastructure. Additionally, some wealthy merchants and nobles from the Land of Fire chose to live in the village for the sake of security. This also explained the abundance of low-level missions available in the village. Of course, the primary source of income for the Hidden Leaf Village came from the military budget allocated by the Land of Fire. Hearing Yorua's remark, Tanako grew a little worried. She was worried he might distance himself because of her family's background. Her nervousness overcame her shyness as she grabbed Yorua's hand and said, "Yorua, you wouldn't dislike me because of my family, would you?" Yorua glanced at Tanako's hands, smooth and fair, almost mesmerizing for a brief moment. But he quickly collected himself and asked, "Why would you think that? Having a rich teammate is a good thing. Why would that make me dislike you?" Hearing Yorua's response, Tanako sighed in relief. She explained, "In the past, when people learned I was from the Bunya family, they didn't want to play with me. The older I got, the worse it became. They were always afraid of upsetting me. Since I entered the Ninja Academy, Jumoku has been the only one willing to play with me." As she spoke, Tanako's mood turned somber. Yorua patted her shoulder and said, "Well, starting today, you've got one more friend. Since we'll be fighting side by side from now on, I hope I can trust you all with my back." Tanako was moved by Yorua's sincerity and nodded enthusiastically. "Yorua, I'll make sure not to drag you down in the future." She was well aware that her talent wasn't outstanding, but Yorua seemed strong. She resolved to work even harder so as not to become a burden to the team. Yorua smiled and reassured her, "You won't. You and Jumoka are both great. Anyway, I should head home, it's getting late. You should go inside now." Tanako nodded, her heart already considering Yorua as someone important. Children's emotions are simple, they can easily grow fond of someone, and just as easily harbor resentment. For now, Yorua still saw Tanako as nothing more than a child. After Yorua left, Tanako remained at the gate, staring in the direction he had gone until his figure disappeared completely. "Is that your new teammate?" The dazed Tanako was startled by a sudden voice near her ear. She turned quickly and saw her mother. "Mom, you scared me. Why do you walk so quietly?" Tanako's mother, Senju, bore a strong resemblance to her daughter. She was about 170 centimeters tall, with waist-length golden hair tied in a ponytail. Despite being nearly 40, she looked as if she were in her 20s. Her demeanor was elegant and composed, and her beauty was undeniable. Most intriguingly, she bore the surname Senju. Had Yorua been there, he would have been astonished. In his impression, there were no known members of the Senju clan living in the Hidden Leaf Village. However, he didn't believe the Senju clan had been wiped out. Such a powerful and prestigious family, renowned in the village, couldn't have been eradicated in just a few decades. If they had been wiped out, it would have been as widely discussed as the downfall of the Uchiha clan. But Yorua had never heard anything about the Senju clan in the village. He speculated that the Senju clan had simply integrated into the village. After all, even Tsunade didn't use the Senju surname, so many clan members had likely abandoned it as well. This assumption wasn't far from the truth. Many members of the Senju clan in the Hidden Leaf Village had indeed forsaken their surname, but not all of them. Although some retained the name Senju, the clan hadn't produced many extraordinary talents since the days of Hashirama and Obirama Senju. While some merged into the village, others remained active in various key departments within the Hidden Leaf. Yorua hadn't noticed this before simply because he had little interaction with others in the village. This wasn't unusual, even with the Sarutobi clan. He'd only ever met Asuma Sarutobi and the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, over the years. However, during the Fourth Great Ninja War, many members of the Sarutobi clan emerged. In quieter times, these clans typically didn't draw much attention unless it was story relevant. With over 10,000 ninja and tens of thousands of civilians, the Hidden Leaf Village was massive, more akin to a large city than a village. Its training grounds alone spanned a 20-kilometer diameter, underscoring its true scale. Tanako's mother was a member of the Senju clan, but she wasn't a ninja, despite keeping the Senju surname. Chapter 9. Tanako Bunya gazed wistfully at the spot where Yorua had disappeared into the distance, reluctant to part with the memory of him. Senju noticed her daughter's expression and smiled knowingly. It seems this teammate is a bit different for you. What kind of person is he? Mai asked gently. Hearing her mother words, Tanako's face flushed with embarrassment. There's nothing different about him. Mom, what are you talking about? She said, flustered. Mai chuckled softly. Oh? But just now, your eyes were glued to that boy. I've never seen you look at Jumoku like that. Tanako glanced at the road illuminated only by streetlights. She sighed softly. I don't really know him. We just met. Mai tilted her head, puzzled. You just met? Isn't he in your class? She assumed Yuru was a transfer student. It wasn't uncommon for students to transfer from smaller ninja villages in the Land of Fire to Hidden Leaf Village. While Hidden Leaf Village was the largest and most powerful ninja village in the Land of Fire, there were several smaller ones scattered across the country. Tanako shook her head. He's in our class, but I never noticed him in the 6 years we've been together, and I didn't know him before now. What? You've been in the same class for 6 years and didn't know each other? Not even a single conversation? Mai asked, incredulous. Is that boy particularly aloof? She found it hard to believe that two classmates could go 6 years without even exchanging words. Tanako turned to her mother and smiled. No, Yuru just had very little presence in the class, less than even mine. Mai was stunned. She couldn't fathom it. If her daughter hadn't said it herself, she would never believe someone's presence could be that negligible. Frowning slightly, Mai asked cautiously, could it be that he's hard to get along with? She was concerned for her daughter. In her experience, students with such low profiles often had reclusive or difficult personalities. She worried Tanako might get hurt. But Tanako shook her head firmly and said, no, Yuru is easy to get along with. I don't know why he was so unnoticed before, but he has a really nice personality. Mai observed her daughter closely, noting how Tanako's eyes seemed to light up when she spoke about Yuru. She felt a headache coming on. Could her naive daughter be developing feelings? Children in the world of shinobi matured quickly. Although they had just graduated from the academy, they already understood matters of the heart. Considering Tanako's exceptional circumstances, a wealthy father, a mother from the prestigious Senju clan, and her own natural beauty, it wasn't surprising that some boys might develop a crush on her. Mai asked carefully, and how do you feel about him? Is it the same as with Jumoku? Tanako, unlike Naruto, understood exactly what her mother was implying. However, she felt conflicted. She had only known Yuru for a day. Although she had a favorable impression of him, it wasn't enough to form any definite feelings. For now, it was simply a budding sense of admiration. After a moment of silence, she raised her head, deep in thought. Tanako Bunya spoke thoughtfully, it feels a bit different. I see Jumoku as a good friend, but with Yuru, it's not quite the same. But we've only known each other for a day. I don't even know why I feel differently about him. Senju frowned slightly, realizing her concerns might be coming true. Maybe it's just curiosity. She suggested. After all, you didn't know him before. It might just be that he piques your interest, nothing more. Mai wasn't eager for her daughter to be deceived by a boy. Her worries weren't unfounded, considering their family wasn't like most others. Though not strictly a shinobi clan, they were a wealthy, prestigious family, and Mai's Senju lineage made them comparable to the elite ninja clans in Hidden Leaf Village. They were firmly part of the village's upper echelon. If Tanako was simply looking for friendship, whether with Jumoku or someone else, Mai was fully supportive. But if genuine feelings were involved, it was crucial to consider the other person's intentions and background. Tanako noticed her mother's worried expression and smiled. Mom, are you worried your daughter might fall for Yuru? Caught off guard, Mai felt a bit awkward but nodded nonetheless. You know our family isn't like others. She said earnestly. You're our only child. One day, you'll inherit the Bunya family, so your partner must be chosen carefully to avoid unnecessary risks. Tanako sighed deeply at her mother's words. Mom, why don't you and Dad just have another child, a younger brother for me? Then I won't have to carry all this responsibility. You child. Mai's cheeks flushed slightly. She truly did love Tanako's father. The two of them had married for love, and their bond had always been strong. Tanako smiled. I'm not sure if I actually like Yuru, but he feels different from my other classmates. He's mysterious, but when I'm with him, I feel a strong sense of security. Mai caught on to something unusual. Mysterious? Are you saying he's withdrawn or aloof? No. Tanako replied. It's more like Yuru gives the impression that there's far more to him than what's on the surface. Mai frowned deeply, her concern mounting. Do you think he might have ulterior motives with you? She asked seriously. Tanako blinked, then chuckled softly. Mom, if that were the case, do you think I'd have any positive feelings toward him at all? Though Tanako's demeanor was gentle and quiet, similar to Hinata's, she wasn't as blindly kind-hearted. She had her own thoughts and judgments. If someone approached her solely because of her family background, she wouldn't like it. In fact, she'd find it deeply repellent. Mai nodded in agreement. She trusted her daughter's judgment. Though Tanako appeared soft and introverted, she was thoughtful and independent. Then what is it? Mai asked. Why does he seem mysterious to you? He's just a newly graduated Geinin, after all. Tanako shook her head. Mom, I think he's already far stronger than me or my classmates. Oh? Is he that remarkable? Mai asked, her curiosity piqued. But why haven't I heard the third Hokage mention him? I've heard about the most outstanding students of this generation, but I don't recall anyone named Yuru. As someone with access to high-level information, especially since her precious daughter was among this year's graduates, Mai found the lack of information about Yuru surprising. Chapter 10 Tanako Bunya looked at her mother and said, That's why I said he's mysterious. Before the class reassignment, I didn't even know he existed, and no one seemed to notice him. Sanju Mai asked, You said he's strong. How can you tell? Although not a ninja herself, Mai, being from the Senju clan, was adept at interpreting such details. Tanako thought back to today's assessment and explained, After the class reassignment, our new instructor tested us. It was a type of Ganjutsu, a mental technique. Jumoku and I almost couldn't endure it, our minds were on the verge of breaking. But Yoru seemed completely unaffected. After the assessment, the instructor revealed that most of the mental pressure was directed at Yoru. What we felt was merely the residual effect. Even so, Yoru didn't seem under any stress at all. Even our instructor was shocked. When we told Asuma-sensei about it, he couldn't believe it either. As she listened to her daughter's account, Mai's frown deepened. This was no small matter. From what you're saying, that child indeed possesses extraordinary mental strength. Mai said thoughtfully. You need to understand, your instructor is a Jonin from the Anbu. Ninja from the Anbu are known for their incredible mental resilience. If even he couldn't phase Yoru, it means the boy's mental strength is far beyond ordinary. People with such mental strength often excel at chakra control. They may also possess a massive reserve of chakra. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she pondered. This is no trivial matter. Although not a ninja, Mai was well versed in the principles of ninjutsu through her clan's extensive knowledge. The Senju clan was renowned for their vast chakra reserves, so Mai understood that strong mental power often correlated with precise chakra control and large reserves. To resist the mental Ganjutsu of an Anbu Jonin, one would need not only exceptional chakra control but also a vast supply to sustain the effort. Otherwise, like Sakura, who had precise control but limited reserves, one would be overwhelmed by an opponent with significantly more chakra. Someone who can control chakra so precisely while having enormous reserves, how could such a person remain unnoticed for 6 years, barely leaving a trace? It's highly unusual. And he's just a child. To go unnoticed for 6 years without revealing anything about himself. That boy's mind works in ways far beyond the ordinary. Tanako, who had initially only been curious about Yoru, found herself astonished by her mother's analysis. Mom, does that mean Yoru really is strong? She asked. Mai looked at her daughter and replied seriously, It's too early to be certain, but barring unforeseen circumstances, his future will likely be extraordinary. Even the most outstanding graduates don't have the ability to stay calm while enduring an Anbu Jonin's mental Ganjutsu. Tanako, it seems that boy truly is. Until we know more about his background, it's best if you keep your distance from him. Senju Mai advised. Although Tanako Bunya wasn't too willing, she understood that her mother only had her best interests at heart. Moreover, after listening to Mai's analysis, Tanako also felt that Yoru's strength was beyond her comprehension. Even if she liked Yoru, she decided to follow her mother's advice for now. Meanwhile, Yoru was unaware that the assessment had caused a rift between him and the Senju mother and daughter. But even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He had already anticipated some exposure from today's assessment. When Yoru returned home, he didn't follow his usual routine of refining chakra before bed. Instead, he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his consciousness slipping into his inner mind space. You have been idle for 1 day. Chakra reserves have doubled, and physical attributes have also doubled. You have gained exceptional learning abilities. As long as your body and chakra are sufficient, you can learn any ninjutsu at the speed of the world's top-tier geniuses. A wave of tingling warmth spread through Yoru's body, so pleasant that he nearly moaned in satisfaction. His mind felt sharper than ever, and knowledge of previously confusing ninjutsu concepts now became crystal clear. It was as though he could fully grasp any jutsu if demonstrated once, much like Hitachi Uchiha. Exiting his mind space, Yoru stared at the ceiling in disbelief. Closing his eyes, he could feel his body brimming with chakra, so dense it felt almost tangible as it coursed through his chakra pathways. The sensation was exhilarating. My chakra reserves have doubled. I must be at the level of an elite Jonin by now, he thought. My physical strength should also have reached the level of a taijutsu chunin. This level of improvement was astounding. After all, few ninjas specialized in taijutsu, and reaching a chunin level in taijutsu alone was already rare. Too bad I don't know any decent ninjutsu yet. It's a bit embarrassing. Thinking about how his only mastered techniques were the basic 3 academy jutsu, he realized that he'd be outmatched even by a standard chunin in combat. Yuru was eager to learn the practical combat jutsu. Since his idol system required him to learn skills before passively improving them, he needed a starting point. As of now, his only fully mastered jutsu were the transformation jutsu, clone jutsu, and substitution jutsu. But relying on these alone in actual combat? Survival would be a challenge, let alone thriving as a ninja. After all, ninjas were professional assassins who employed any means necessary, no matter how cunning or ruthless. Facing professional ninjas with just the 3 academy jutsu was a death wish. Yuru wasn't arrogant enough to think he could take on Jonin or even Chunin level ninjas yet. Still, tonight's gains are already incredible. With exceptional learning abilities, I should be able to master basic ninjutsu with just one demonstration. After tomorrow's mission, I'll head to the training grounds to see if anyone's practicing jutsu. At the very least, I need to learn some offensive techniques for combat. I have no intention of becoming a taijutsu-only ninja. Though the 8 gates technique was powerful, Yuru had no desire to learn it even if given the chance. The aftermath of using the 8 gates was too devastating, and he didn't wish to meet such an end. Besides, it was Might Guy's signature move, not something casually taught to others. Those who learned it, like Guy, Kakashi, and Rock Lee, had special connections to him. Kakashi was Guy's closest friend, and Lee was his direct disciple. As for Yuru, he had no ties to them. Naturally, learning the 8 gates had never crossed Yoru's mind. Chapter 11. At home, Toichi suddenly opened his eyes and looked toward the balcony. In a cold tone, he said, "Captain, it seems you've heard about that kid." As soon as Toichi finished speaking, a figure appeared on the balcony. "Toichi, I didn't expect you to leave the Anbu to become a guidance teacher," the newcomer said calmly. Under the moonlight, the figure became clear. If Naruto and his team had been there, they would have shouted, "Kakashi-sensei." Indeed, the figure standing on the balcony was none other than Team 7's mentor, Kakashi Hatake. Hearing Kakashi's remark, Toichi stepped out onto the balcony, leaning against the railing. Gazing at the moonlit night, he said quietly, "You left too, didn't you? Staying in the shadows for too long does make you want to step into the sunlight." Kakashi studied Toichi carefully. "It seems you're quite impressed with that kid," Kakashi observed. "I am," Toichi admitted with a rare smile, recalling Yoru's performance earlier that day. "He's a remarkable little guy." Kakashi's expression, however, turned serious. "You must know that he might not be as simple as he seems," Kakashi warned. Toichi turned his head to look at Kakashi. After a long pause, he said, "From what I see, he's just a kid who doesn't like being in the spotlight. There's no need to overthink it. If he really had ulterior motives, I wouldn't have been able to test him so easily. I think you know that as well, Kakashi," Toichi added. Kakashi was momentarily taken aback. That's true, if Yoru had any malicious intentions, Toichi wouldn't have been able to probe him so effortlessly. Even so, it's wise to remain cautious around him, Kakashi insisted. Toichi chuckled. "Don't tell me you doubt my abilities. I used to work in the interrogation department, you know. From the moment I saw him, I could tell he's just someone who dislikes drawing attention to himself. He's different from you. Even you, at his age, probably enjoyed basking in others' praise." Kakashi felt a bit awkward. Despite his current reserved demeanor, Kakashi had been a very different person before Rin Nohar's death. After a moment, Kakashi said, "Regardless, I'll be keeping an eye on him. If anything unexpected happens, I'll intervene." Kakashi hadn't intended to say this aloud. After all, Yuru was Toichi's student, and such a statement openly implied Kakashi's intention to interfere, something most people wouldn't take kindly to. But Toichi didn't seem offended. He responded calmly, "Do as you please. If that kid ever poses a threat to the village, I'll personally destroy him. But until then, he's my student, and I have high hopes for him. I'll train him to become a powerful protector of the village." Though Toichi had been strict with Yoru's team during the day, he was deeply impressed with Yoru. Initially, Toichi hadn't planned to take his role as a mentor seriously. But Yoru's potential had inspired him to nurture the boy into a formidable warrior. In Toichi's eyes, Yuru wasn't just a genius, He was a genius with an exceptionally stable temperament. Seeing Toichi's determination, Kakashi said no more. Although he wasn't considered particularly strong within the Anbu, he still belonged to the Anbu interrogation corps. However, his meticulous and cautious nature made Toichi the least likely person to consider Yuru a threat to the village compared to other shinobi. Still, he was somewhat curious about Yuru. After leaving Toichi, Kakashi went directly to Yoru's home. For someone of Kakashi's stature, gathering information about Yuru was a trivial task. And now, here he was, standing on Yoru's balcony. At this moment, Yuru was already asleep and entirely unaware of Kakashi's presence. Even though Yoru's chakra reserves were nearly comparable to Kakashi's, it was merely a matter of chakra volume. In terms of battle experience and mastery of jutsu, Yuru was utterly defenseless against Kakashi. Currently, Yoru's strength barely approached that of a chunin. He was slightly stronger than a typical genin, capable of holding his own briefly against an average chunin, but no more than that. Naturally, he couldn't detect Kakashi's presence. Standing on the balcony, Kakashi observed the sleeping Yuru through the window. After watching for a while, he raised his forehead protector, revealing his Sharingan. The three Tomui spun rapidly in the blood-red pupil. In an instant, Kakashi observed the chakra flow within Yuru. But what he saw left him stunned. What? How is this possible? The chakra in this boy is terrifying. Kakashi almost lost his balance and nearly fell off the balcony railing. The overwhelming chakra emanating from Yoru's body shocked Kakashi. This massive chakra. Can a 12-year-old really possess such reserves? Even though Naruto's chakra reserves dwarfed Yoru's, hundreds of times greater in fact, it had to be acknowledged that Naruto's case was unique. With the Uzumaki clan's bloodline and the Nine Tails chakra, Naruto's reserves were expected to be immense. Even though the Nine Tails chakra in Naruto was only a portion leaking through the 8-trigram seal, it still granted him hundreds of times more chakra than Kakashi. Naruto was an exception, a Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails with the Uzumaki bloodline, which explained his massive reserves. But for an ordinary shinobi with no lineage from ninja clans, it was incomprehensible for Yuru to possess so much chakra. Kakashi's expression grew increasingly grim. His chakra reserves are already 60% of mine and about 20 times Sasuke's. Kakashi compared Yuru to Sasuke because even Sasuke's chakra levels were unusual. As a member of the Uchiha clan and the reincarnation of Indra, Sasuke inherently had a larger chakra pool than most, second only to the Uzumaki and Senju clans. As Indra's reincarnation, Sasuke's chakra reserves far exceeded those of his peers. He had already mastered the fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu, a jutsu requiring chakra reserves beyond the capability of most genin. Yet even so, Yoru's chakra reserves vastly exceeded Sasuke's, by about 20 times. Before meeting Yuru, Kakashi had assumed he was merely a thoughtful and talented genius. Now, he believed Yuru to be a monstrous prodigy. The sheer volume of his chakra defied all logic. Kakashi couldn't fathom why Yuru had so much chakra. Upon closer examination, Kakashi was shocked once more. It's not just the enormous amount of chakra, its quality is also unusual. This chakra isn't ordinary. Its composition is different from regular chakra. What Kakashi didn't realize was that Yoru's chakra was condensed from natural energy. It wasn't ordinary chakra at all. If Jiraiya had been present, he would have immediately recognized it as Sage Chakra. Yoru's chakra, formed naturally from ambient energy, had transformed into Sage Chakra within his body. And this transformation hadn't altered his body in a negative way. Instead, it had nourished him, bringing him closer to the physique of a sage body. Chapter 12 Yoru's chakra is Sage Chakra, so while its volume is comparable to that of an elite Jonin, its quality surpasses even that level. Kakashi furrowed his brows, suddenly recalling something. This kid's chakra feels somewhat like Jiraiya-sama's chakra. No, it's like Jiraiya-sama's chakra when he enters a certain state. Kakashi had witnessed Jiraiya in sage mode before. Now, the chakra emanating from Yuru gave Kakashi the same sensation as Jiraiya's sage mode. This boy truly harbors many secrets. At that moment, Kakashi was conflicted. By protocol, Yoru's situation should be reported to the third Hokage. But after all his years in the Anbu and witnessing numerous events, Kakashi understood all too well, if he reported this to the third Hokage, Yoru's life would never be the same, regardless of whether he posed a threat to the village. He might even end up as a test subject in a laboratory. Considering this, Kakashi calmed himself. Let's hope you don't pose a threat to Hidden Leaf Village. Ultimately, Kakashi decided to keep Yoru's situation a secret. In Hidden Leaf Village, apart from the Hyuga clan, Kakashi was the only one capable of discerning the unique chakra within Yuru. As long as Kakashi remained silent, even if Asuma or the third Hokage noticed something, they wouldn't understand the special nature of Yorui's chakra. Having made his decision, Kakashi disappeared from Yorui's balcony. Yoru, meanwhile, had no idea he had nearly been reported to the Hokage. Not that it would have mattered to him. After all, he was living a second life. As for what path he would take, even he wasn't too concerned. Even the possibility of being turned into a test subject didn't faze him much. If he could resist, he would. If he couldn't, there was no point worrying about it. At this moment, Yorui's mindset was particularly serene. He neither had grand ambitions nor was he resigned to failure. He simply lived an ordinary life. The next morning, Yuru arrived early at the training grounds. He noticed that Tanako seemed somewhat distant compared to the day before. Yamada Jumoku, on the other hand, behaved as usual. Sidling up to Yuru, he asked quietly, "Yuru, did you and Tanako talk about anything after yesterday?" Yamada Jumoku asked with an unmistakable air of curiosity. Yuru replied indifferently, "What do you want to hear?" Jumoku grinned mischievously. "You know what I want to hear. Nothing happened, obviously. What are you imagining?" Yuru felt exasperated. He had just met Tanako, how could there be anything worth mentioning? Even if there were, he wouldn't share it with Jumoku. Looking disappointed, Jumoku said, "Can't you tell Tanako likes you? You missed such a great opportunity yesterday, it's really disappointing. You don't think Tanako was unattractive, do you?" Jumoku's words left Yoru speechless. "What are you even talking about? Did something really come up at your house yesterday?" Yoru was skeptical, suspecting that Jumoku might have left on purpose. Perhaps there wasn't anything urgent at his house at all. Jumoku looked at Yoru with utter disappointment. "Don't ask. I'm just disappointed in you. Such a good opportunity. You actually didn't seize the opportunity. Tanako might not be from a ninja clan, but she comes from a prestigious family in the Land of Fire. She's beautiful, has a gentle personality, and even likes you. If I were you, I'd have confessed to her yesterday without hesitation." Yamada Jumoku sighed and shook his head, looking deeply disappointed. Meanwhile, Yoru was exasperated. "What's going on in that brain of yours? Are you really 12 years old?" While Yoru was aware that kids in this world matured quickly, this level of early maturity still felt absurd. He couldn't help but suspect that Yamada Jumoku might secretly be in his 20s, how else could he be thinking so much about these things? Yoru himself hadn't even considered any of this. Yamada Jumoku raised his hand, gesturing for silence. "I'm disappointed, so disappointed. Yoru, you've really let me down." His mock adult demeanor made Yoru's lips twitch in frustration. "You should put that energy into your training instead. If you were this serious about practicing, you wouldn't be stuck at your current level of strength." In this graduating class, Yamada Jumoku's strength ranked somewhere in the middle. Of course, Yoru was the same, or at least, that's how it appeared. But in reality, Yoru's abilities far exceeded Jumoku's now. Tanako, standing nearby, overheard their conversation and blushed furiously, her face nearly as red as blood. Yet she couldn't bring herself to say anything. After all, Yamada Jumoku and Yoru were speaking softly, clearly intending for her not to hear. She wasn't sure if Yoru had any feelings for her, but last night, she almost confessed to him herself. At the last moment, however, she lost her nerve. Even now, though she followed her mother's advice to keep some distance from Yoru, she still felt a strong fondness for him. Just as the three were talking, Yoru suddenly sensed something. Buzz, buzz, clang, clang. Several sharp metallic sounds echoed as Yoru stepped in front of Yamada Jumoku and Tanako, a kunai clenched in his hand. On the ground to either side of him, several kunai and shuriken were embedded in the dirt. Frowning, Yoru looked toward the distance. "Sensei Kion, you've gone too far. We've only just graduated as ninja," he said, clearly displeased. The earlier attack was something an ordinary genin could never have avoided. Had Yoru not acted, both Yamada Jumoku and Tanako would have been turned into pincushions. From their stunned expressions, it was obvious that neither of them had realized how narrowly they'd escaped disaster. What annoyed Yoru most was that Kion Toichi's reckless actions had nearly caused harm, or even death, for Yamada Jumoku and Tanako. As Yoru finished speaking, Kion Toichi emerged from behind a distant tree. Clapping his hands, he said, "Not bad. Just as I expected, this level of attack doesn't pose any threat to you." He seemed unfazed by Yoru's rebuke. It was only now that Yamada Jumoku and Tanako grasped what had just happened, they'd been attacked by their teacher. Looking down at the kunai and shuriken near their feet, a chill ran through them. If Yoru hadn't intervened or failed to block the projectiles, they might have been killed before they even knew what was happening. The pair turned their gaze toward Kion Toichi, their fear of him growing. From the oppressive aura he'd exuded yesterday to today's sudden ambush, his method seemed harsh and unforgiving. As they shifted their focus to Yoru's back, they were struck by how towering and solid he seemed, like an unyielding mountain shielding them. But Yuru himself wasn't feeling so charitable. To him, Kiyotoichi's actions showed a blatant disregard for their lives. Seeing Yoru's angered expression, Kiyotoichi slowly approached. "Don't be so upset. This was just a test of your reflexes. I wouldn't let my students be in real danger," he said lightly. But Yoru wasn't buying this excuse. Still, with everyone unharmed, he felt there wasn't much more to say. What Yoru didn't realize was that his swift and precise defense against Kiyotoichi's kunai and shuriken had deeply impressed the latter. Chapter 13. Although ninja tool throwing techniques are taught in the Ninja Academy and considered fundamental skills, for most freshly graduated ninja, these techniques are not yet practical for combat. Only geniuses like Kakashi Hatake and Itachi Uchiha could wield ninja tools effectively in real battles as early as 6 or 7 years old. Moments ago, Kiyotoichi had thrown kunai and shuriken with full force, an attack that most ninja below the rank of Chunin would struggle to defend against. Yet Yoru not only blocked the attack but also reacted swiftly and tracked the flight paths of the kunai and shuriken with precision. This demonstrated that Yoru's physical strength and coordination were exceptional, but even more remarkable were his heightened sensory perception and sharp vision. At the very least, Kiyotoichi himself could not have performed at such a level when he was Yoru's age. Yoru, however, had no idea what was going through Kiyotoichi's mind. He was simply dissatisfied with him. Still, it was just dissatisfaction. Yoru had no intention of doing anything about it. Given his current strength, there wasn't much he could do anyway. Kiyotoichi approached the trio and announced, "Today, I'll take you to receive your first mission." The previously frightened Tanako and Yamada Jumoku lit up with excitement upon hearing this. They completely forgot how scared they had been moments ago. "Really? Sensei, can we already start taking missions?" they asked eagerly. Kiyotoichi nodded expressionlessly. "Of course. However, for now, you're limited to missions ranked sea level and below. During the missions, I'll also continue training you. You'd better prepare yourselves," he added, his tone suddenly turning icy. "My training is very rigorous." He glanced at Yoru, a faint smirk on his lips. "But I suspect you're looking forward to it." Yoru frowned. "Sensei Toichi, the three of us are just freshly graduated students from the academy. Tests like the one earlier seem unnecessary, don't they?" Kiyotoichi patted Yoru on the shoulder. "You're still holding a grudge, huh? Maybe for the other two, the days ahead will be tough. But for you, it's likely to be a good thing." Yoru understood what Kiyotoichi meant. In truth, he was looking forward to learning whatever jutsu Toichi could teach him. But he also felt the rigorous training might not be fair to Yamada Jumoku and Tanako. Both of them were of average talent. If Kiyotoichi pushed them too hard, they would undoubtedly struggle. Seeing Yoru remain silent, Kiyotoichi chuckled. "Let's go to the Hokage's office to pick up a mission." Yamada Jumoku and Tanako, too excited about their first mission, didn't notice the exchange between Kiyotoichi and Yoru. As the four of them left, a figure stood perched on a tree in the training grounds. It was Kakashi, who should have been leading Team 7 to pick up their mission. He held a book in his hand, but his focus had long since shifted from its pages. He had observed the entirety of Kiyotoichi's test of Yoru. Yoru's performance had surprised even him. Even after the group had left, Kakashi muttered to himself, "He doesn't just have a vast amount of chakra. His physical reflexes far surpass those of a regular ninja, and his vision is already comparable to mine without the Sharingan." The precision with which Yoru countered Kiyotoichi's kunai and shuriken left a lasting impression on Kakashi. Kakashi thought to himself that even an average chunin might not have been able to react to that attack. Even if they knew it was coming, they wouldn't have been able to keep up, detect the trajectory of the ninja tools, or block them. Such reflexes and visual acuity were beyond what an ordinary ninja could possess. Kakashi even suspected that Yoru's vision at that moment was on par with his own while using the Sharingan. "I wonder if this guy could learn my Chidori." Recalling Yoru's sharp vision and agile movements, Kakashi admitted Yoru was an excellent match for his Chidori technique. But the Chidori was an A-rank jutsu. Not only did Yoru have no direct connection to Kakashi or wasn't his student, but even if Kakashi were willing to teach him, he might not dare to. A-rank jutsu aren't just powerful and destructive, more importantly, they pose significant risks to the user if used incorrectly. This was one reason why Kakashi decided to teach Sasuke. It wasn't just because Sasuke was his student but also because Sasuke had the Sharingan. Even with the Sharingan, it took Kakashi a full month of intense training to master Chidori. As he watched Yoru's retreating figure, Kakashi murmured, If you truly mean no harm to the village, you could be someone worth nurturing. If guided well, you might even become the next fourth Hokage. At this moment, Kakashi's vigilance toward Yoru diminished significantly. What changed his perspective was seeing Yoru's genuine anger when Toichi's actions endangered his teammates. That anger was real, and it showed Kakashi that Yoru cherished his teammates, a trait Kakashi valued and trusted. Yoru reminded Kakashi of his younger self. No, in many ways, Yoru handled things better than he had back then. After all, there was a long period in Kakashi's past when he had been lost in despair. I'm honestly a little envious of Toichi. Kakashi muttered with a sigh. What luck, stumbling upon such a promising talent. In Kakashi's eyes, as long as Yoru didn't fall along the way, his future achievements would be no less impressive than Kakashi's own. Thinking of his own 3 problematic students, Kakashi felt a headache coming on. Sasuke and Naruto certainly had great potential. Sasuke was Uchiha and had already awakened his Sharingan. Naruto was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki and inherited the Uzumaki clan's bloodline. But neither of them was easy to teach. In fact, the third Hokage had assigned them to Kakashi partly to use Sasuke's Sharingan as a way to monitor and control Naruto. However, both Sasuke and Naruto had eccentric personalities. By comparison, Kakashi felt Yoru might be easier to guide. At least Yoru seemed far more mature in his thinking. Shaking his head, Kakashi disappeared from the training grounds. Soon, Yoru and his team arrived at the Hokage's office. The third Hokage didn't notice anything particularly special about Yoru. Neither Asuma, Kakashi, nor Toichi had mentioned anything about Yoru to him. After leaving the Hokage's office, the group encountered Team 7, who were also there to accept a mission. Upon seeing Yoru, Naruto cheerfully waved and called out, "Hey, Yoru! What mission did you guys get?" Naruto dashed over, grinning as he asked. "Just a D-rank mission." Yoru replied casually. After all, it was their first mission. It was impossible to start with something too difficult. Naruto, unaware of this, laughed and said, "A D-rank mission? We're definitely getting a C-rank mission this time." Yoru simply responded, "Well, good luck then." Meanwhile, Kakashi's gaze remained fixed on Yoru. Yoru's demeanor and composure left a strong impression on him. In Kakashi's mind, Yoru was the ideal student he wished he could have. Their personalities seemed to align well. Standing next to Kakashi, Sasuke glanced at Yoru with a hint of puzzlement. He didn't have much impression of Yoru and didn't even recall that they had been in the same class. The same was true for Sakura. However, seeing Yoru, Sakura couldn't help but be a little taken aback. On the surface, she remained calm, but internally she thought, he's just as handsome as Sasuke. Who is he? He seems pretty familiar with Naruto. How could someone like that possibly get along so well with Naruto? Chapter 14. In Sakura's mind, Naruto didn't have many friends. Toichi only glanced at Kakashi, gave a slight nod as a greeting, and then led his 3 students away. The way Kakashi looked at him left Toichi speechless. He thought to himself, is Kakashi keeping an eye on Yoru? Toichi assumed Kakashi's interest was because Yoru was hiding his true strength. If Toichi knew that Kakashi was actually envious of him, he might have been more cautious. After all, every teacher wants a top-notch student. After Yoru's group left, Sakura looked at Kakashi curiously. "Kakashi-sensei, who was that?" Sakura had noticed that Kakashi had been watching Yoru the whole time. She assumed Kakashi was very familiar with him. Kakashi turned back and replied nonchalantly, "An interesting guy. Let's go in." Kakashi wasn't willing to explain further to Sakura. Sasuke, on the other hand, had felt a faint sense of pressure from Yoru ever since their brief encounter. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. At the Ninja Academy, Sasuke had always been at the top of his class, never paying attention to his peers. The idea of a classmate making him feel pressured was unthinkable. But just from that brief interaction, Sasuke had the sense that Yoru might one day become his rival. Kakashi remained silent, but Naruto, grinning, cheerfully said to Sakura, "That's Team 11. That guy who's almost as good-looking as me is Yoru, and he's my friend." Though they had only recently met, Naruto had already decided that Yoru was his friend. He didn't seem to notice Yoru's distant attitude toward him. Sakura rolled her eyes at Naruto's comment. "Idiot Naruto, you're so full of yourself." In Sakura's mind, Yoru's looks were on par with Sasuke's. In fact, if not for Sasuke's special place in her heart, she might have thought Yoru was even more attractive. On the other side, Yoru and his team arrived at the Hidden Leaf Village back mountain. Looking at the massive waterfall ahead, Yamada Jumoku and Tanako both wore sour expressions. "Sensei, why did we get a mission like this? And how are we supposed to pick up the trash under the waterfall?" Their mission was to clean up all the trash in the lake at the base of the waterfall in the back mountain of Hidden Leaf Village. Since they were just rookies, it was natural they wouldn't get combat missions. However, the waterfall upstream was about 40 to 50 meters tall, with a powerful and fast current. Just thinking about cleaning up the trash under the waterfall was enough to give anyone a headache. Toichi, his face expressionless, said, "Today, I'll teach you how to use Chakra to walk on water without sinking." Upon hearing this, Yamada Jumoku and Tanako's previously bitter expressions lit up with excitement. "Really, sensei? Are you going to teach us ninjutsu?" Yuru glanced at Toichi and noticed the latter looking back at him. Walking on water? It's a basic but very practical skill. Yuru said to himself. Though it was basic, Yuru had never learned it before. Back then, due to his average talent, he hadn't trained in it. Now, however, Yuru was quite eager. Seeing Yoru's interest, Toichi smiled slightly. "Follow me to the lake, and I'll demonstrate." The group moved to a calmer section of the lake, far from the waterfall's turbulent waters. There, the water was much more tranquil, making it an ideal place for training. "This is a great place to train." Toichi stepped forward and slowly placed his foot on the water's surface. "Pay attention. As your foot touches the water, control the chakra in your body and attach it to the soles of your feet," he explained. "Make sure to manage the amount of chakra carefully. It must be just enough to support your body weight. Too much or too little won't work. This balance is something you'll need to practice and master on your own." As he spoke, Toichi was already standing on the water, as steady as if he were on solid ground, without even a hint of sinking. This sight left Yamada Jumoku and Tanako both stunned. "Wow! Sensei, you're actually standing on the water without falling. That's amazing." Neither of them came from a ninja family, so they had never seen this kind of ninjutsu before. Even Yoru, though usually calm, was surprised to see Toichi standing so firmly on the water's surface. Imagining it and witnessing it firsthand were completely different experiences. Unable to contain his excitement, Yamada Jumoku was the first to give it a try. He walked to the edge of the lake, cautiously focusing chakra into the soles of his feet. Though Toichi had demonstrated and explained the principle, Jumoku still felt a bit nervous. Carefully, he placed his foot on the water. The moment he tried to step fully onto the surface, his foot slipped, and he fell into the water with a splash. "This is so hard. Sensei, how do you make it look so easy?" Climbing out of the water, dripping wet, Jumoku wiped his hair with a sheepish look toward Toichi. Seeing Jumoku's failure, Tanako, who had been eager to try, hesitated. "Is it really that hard? Sensei made it look so simple, and the theory doesn't sound complicated," Tanako said, glancing at Jumoku. Walking back to the shore, Jumoku gave a wry smile. "It's impossible. The theory might sound simple, but controlling the chakra just right is really tough." Toichi nodded. "That's correct. Even though you didn't succeed, you've grasped the core of this ninjutsu. The key lies in controlling the precise amount of chakra. It requires a high degree of precision, and that's something you'll have to develop through practice and experimentation." Jumoku nodded. "It's so hard. I think it'll take me a long time to master this." He sighed in frustration. "I didn't even feel like my body could stand on the water for a moment. It was the same as if I hadn't used chakra at all." "Sensei, how long did it take you to learn this ninjutsu?" Jumoku asked curiously, wondering how much time Toichi, an elite Jonin, had needed. After all, becoming a Jonin was no small feat, and such individuals were often considered geniuses from a young age. Toichi replied calmly, 2 days. 2 days? Even you needed 2 days? Then it'll probably take us 10 times longer," Jumoku exclaimed. Though his talent was average, Jumoku had a solid understanding of ninjutsu theory. He was well aware that his abilities were far inferior to Toichi's. Tanako, who had been contemplating her turn, withdrew her foot after hearing Jumoku's comment. Her talent was about the same as his. "Sensei, what about all that trash under the waterfall?" Tanako asked, pointing to the debris at the base of the falls. Looking at the immense force of the cascading water, she felt a pang of fear. The drop of several dozen meters and the powerful current could easily crush a person. Toichi shook his head. "That's for you to figure out. It's the main purpose of this mission. If you can't even handle something this simple, how do you expect to survive against powerful enemies in the future? They won't hesitate to kill you." Chapter 15 Toichi's icy tone startled both Yamada Jumoku and Tanako. Watching them, Yuru shook his head. "Sensei, don't scare them like that." Standing steadily on the water, Toichi turned to Yuru with a faint smile. "What about you? Aren't you going to give it a try?" He was curious to see if Yuru had grasped the technique. Yamada Jumoku and Tanako also shifted their gaze to Yuru. By now, they both knew Yuru was slightly stronger than they were and were eager to see if he could master this technique. Yuru hesitated for a moment. When Toichi had explained the principle, Yuru had already understood it completely, down to calculating the exact amount of chakra needed. Yet, he wasn't sure if he could pull it off. Now, he was curious himself. Go ahead and try. Toichi encouraged. Yuru nodded and stepped toward the water's edge, focusing his chakra. In an instant, chakra surged through his body's pathways. With a sharp focus, Yuru placed one foot onto the water's surface. Plop. The once calm surface of the water rippled and sank beneath his foot. Just as the other three thought Yuru was about to fall in, the water beneath his foot rebounded, stabilizing and supporting his weight. Moments later, Yuru placed his other foot on the water, standing fully upright without the slightest sign of sinking. No way. Yuru, have you practiced this before? Yamada Jumoku exclaimed, dumbfounded. Seeing Yuru succeed on his first try made him wonder if Yuru had secretly learned this beforehand. Tanako, meanwhile, stared at Yuru with wide eyes, her expression filled with an inexplicable awe. Toichi was equally stunned. You've already mastered it? Yuru, too, was a little surprised. Though he knew his physical and chakra abilities had significantly improved, he hadn't expected to succeed on his first attempt. At that moment, he finally realized how terrifyingly powerful the exceptional learning ability granted by his system truly was. Even Sasuke, a prodigious genius, had needed an entire day of grueling effort to master tree climbing, a similar chakra control exercise, and had been covered in injuries by the end. Despite his astonishment, Yuru quickly regained his composure. I'm not sure how, but I guess I just learned it, he said with an innocent expression. Hearing his words, coupled with his innocent demeanor, the three others couldn't help but twitch at the corners of their mouths. If the situation had allowed, they might have been tempted to turn him into a punching bag. What they didn't know was that Yoru's words were entirely true. The moment Toichi had explained the principle, Yoru's brain had deconstructed every detail of the technique. He had calculated all the variables and conditions necessary for success. All that remained was executing it by releasing chakras dictated by his calculations. And with his extraordinary chakra control, he had succeeded flawlessly on the first try. Toichi snapped out of his shock. Though still amazed, he quickly composed himself. Inwardly, he thought, geniuses are simply beyond comprehension. However, if Kakashi had heard Toichi's thoughts, he would have disagreed. No, this isn't genius. This is monstrous. After all, Kakashi himself had needed an entire day to learn water walking, even though he had been only 6 years old at the time and had the advantage of coming from the Hotake clan, with access to family teachings and early training. Yoru, on the other hand, was only just beginning his training and had previously only mastered the basic 3 clone jutsus. Yoru's talent defied logic. No matter how talented someone is, mastering a technique requiring such precise chakra control in one go should be impossible. Toichi, visibly shaken, asked, "Are you sure you've never learned this before?" Yoru shook his head. "I only learned the 3 clone jutsus in school, that's the only jutsu I've ever mastered." "In that case, it seems your time in the Ninja Academy actually hindered your development," Toichi said earnestly. He truly believed Yoru's years at the academy had delayed his growth. "If you hadn't kept your talent hidden in school, we might have discovered it much earlier," Toichi added with a wry smile. Yamada Jumoku and Tanako nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Yoru was way too low-key at school," said Yamada Jumoku. "If you'd shown off your talent, even Sasuke wouldn't have been able to compete with you." Yoru waved dismissively. "I didn't want to cause trouble. Didn't you see how many people pester Sasuke every day?" Hearing this, Toichi asked, "So that's why you chose to hide your talent?" Yoru nodded. "Exactly. Why make life harder for myself? I had to spend 6 years at the academy, after all." Of course, this wasn't the truth. Yoru's talent had indeed been mediocre in the past. But even if he'd been gifted back then, he still wouldn't have flaunted it in the academy. It wasn't because he feared interference from the third Hokage or Danzō, but simply because he didn't want unnecessary trouble. This was genuinely how Yoru felt, and he spoke with such sincerity that Toichi believed him. He hadn't expected Yoru's reason for hiding his talent to be so straightforward. Yamada Jumoku and Tanako, on the other hand, found Yoru's mindset baffling. If either of them had Yoru's talent, they would have become little tyrants in the academy. After all, most children love showing off their uniqueness to their peers. Toichi shook his head, smiling wryly at how he had overthought things. The real reason for Yoru hiding his talent was so simple it caught him off guard. But he believed it, entirely because of how convincingly Yoru spoke. Having worked in the Anbu as an interrogator, Toichi could tell Yoru wasn't lying. With his doubts now cleared, Toichi dropped his guard against Yuru and genuinely regarded him as his student. Alright, since you've mastered it, try walking on flowing water. Toichi instructed. He wanted to see Yoru's limits. Yamada Jumoku and Tanako looked at Yuru with anticipation. Though they hadn't learned the technique yet, they were happy to see Yuru growing stronger. It meant they'd have someone to rely on during missions. Yuru nodded and walked toward the flowing section of the water. The moment he approached it, his brain was flooded with countless calculations. Every variable of the flowing water was instantly analyzed, and his body adjusted his chakra output accordingly. From the riverbank, the trio watched as Yuru reached the flowing water and stood steadily on the surface without any issue. They were stunned. Even Toichi stared in disbelief, his eyes wide. This guy. He's a monster. He muttered. Although Yamada Jumoku and Tanako didn't fully grasp the extent of Yoru's accomplishment, they could sense how extraordinary it was. Sensei, is standing on flowing water harder than still water? Tanako asked. Toichi's mouth twitched. Of course. Think about it, on flowing water, the chakra you release has to constantly adjust to the movement. Standing on flowing water is at least 10 times harder than standing on still water. Even for me, it took about 10 days to barely manage it. This guy is a complete monster, he said, his expression serious. Toichi couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be long before he ran out of things to teach Yuru. If Yuru could master such a challenging technique so quickly, learning other jutsu would only be easier. After all, water walking requires an incredibly high level of chakra control, more so than mastering a C-rank jutsu. Yoru's talent was beyond terrifying. Chapter 16. Yuru didn't stop in the middle of the lake. Instead, he continued walking toward the base of the waterfall. He wanted to test the limits of his abilities. However, when Toichi saw Yuru heading toward the waterfall's base, he panicked and shouted, "Yuru, that's enough. Don't go any further, it's too dangerous." But Yuru didn't stop. As he got closer, the roaring sound of the waterfall crashing into the lake and a spray of water made his heart race. Still, he steeled himself and pressed forward, determined to find his limits. Seeing that Yuru wasn't stopping and was nearing the base of the waterfall, Toichi hurriedly ran toward him. But just as he was a few meters away, he stopped in his tracks. He saw the serious expression on Yoru's face. In that moment, he understood Yoru's intent. Despite his worry, Toichi chose to respect Yoru's resolve. The thunderous sound of the waterfall filled the air, and the mist from the crashing water had already soaked Yoru's clothes. Yet, he remained expressionless as he moved closer to where the waterfall struck the lake. His body rose and fell with the turbulent waves, but his feet stayed firmly planted on the water's surface. Beneath his feet, chakra clung tightly to the water, keeping him steady. When he was only 5 or 6 meters away from the base of the waterfall, Yuru finally stopped. It wasn't because he fell, he stopped because the spray from the waterfall was too intense. The cascading water relentlessly pounded against him, making it nearly impossible to move forward. Still, Yuru had found his limit. Hey, even if I walked directly into the waterfall, I wouldn't fall. But I'd definitely get smashed into the water by the force of it. Yuru thought to himself. He knew that while he could stand firm on the churning water, the sheer power of the waterfall would overwhelm him. The force of the water was simply too much for his current physical capabilities to endure. After all, he was only testing his chakra control, not risking his life. Yuru wasn't about to gamble everything here. Taking a few steps back, he turned to face Toichi, who stood on the shore, his expression tense and ready to leap in to save him at any moment. At that moment, Yuru truly acknowledged his teacher. Despite Toichi's cold demeanor, Yuru could feel his genuine concern. Yuru smiled. "Sensei, it looks like I've mastered it." Toichi let out a sigh of relief. Walking up to him, he patted Yuru on the shoulder, glancing at his soaked clothes. "You're too reckless. Even if you want to find your limits, this was far too dangerous," Toichi said. "You're still a rookie. The power of that waterfall is something you can't withstand right now." Yuru didn't respond, only offering a quiet smile. The two returned to the shore, where Yamada Jumoku and Tanako stood frozen in shock. In their minds, the image of Yuru approaching the ferocious waterfall was still vivid. At that moment, Yuru seemed almost godlike. Neither of them could have imagined the gap between them and Yuru would be so vast. "Mom, Yuru is definitely not someone who can't be trusted," Tanako thought to herself. In that moment, she dismissed her mother's advice to stay away from Yuru. As for Yamada Jumoku, his face was filled with admiration. The scene he had just witnessed was too awe-inspiring, it was beyond anything he could have imagined. Yuru, like them, was a rookie who had just graduated from the ninja academy. "Yuru, how did you do it? You scared me half to death earlier," Yamada Jumoku exclaimed. I can't believe you managed to stand so steadily on the water in a situation like that. Yuru didn't say much, only offering a faint smile. Now that he had mastered the water walking technique, cleaning up the lake's trash became significantly easier. Even the garbage near the waterfall could be hooked out with kunai tied to steel wires. Back in the academy, besides the 3 basic jutsus, Yuru had also mastered ninja tool throwing skills to a high degree. After unlocking his chakra restrictions and gaining exceptional learning abilities, his proficiency with ninja tools reached an unparalleled level. It was likely that even Kion Toichi's ninja tool throwing couldn't surpass Yoru's expertise. After spending the entire afternoon, the group finally managed to clean up all the trash in the lake. The 3 of them sat under a tree on the shore to rest. Yamada Jumoku and Tanako were drenched in sweat from exhaustion, while Yoru, apart from his wet clothes, didn't seem tired at all. If it had been just him, Yoru thought, he might have finished the task even faster. But the mission required the 3 of them to work together to achieve the objective. Completing the task wasn't the most important thing, what mattered was that the group gained valuable experience. You're tired, right? This kind of task is relatively simple and not dangerous. Kion Toichi said. When you start taking on combat missions, that's when you'll truly experience the hardships of being a ninja. Alright, it's getting dark. Let's turn in the mission, and I'll treat you all to barbecue afterward. Yamada Jumoku, who had been panting from exhaustion, immediately jumped up at the mention of barbecue. You're the best, sensei. Barbecue time. Even for ninjas, barbecue was considered a high-end meal. If someone ate a lot, it could even drain the wallet of a jonin. Of course, none of the 3 were as voracious as Choji. Yoru stood up as well and joked, Sensei, it's rare to see you being so generous. Tanako also got up and smiled, yeah, I used to think Sensei was a difficult person to get along with. Kion Toichi didn't respond. In the past, he was indeed a stern and unapproachable individual. However, this trio was the first group of students he had ever mentored, and he was especially impressed with Yoru. He even considered taking Yoru on as a personal apprentice. Naturally, his attitude toward them was different from how he treated others. After completing the mission and enjoying their barbecue meal, Yoru returned home to rest. Lying on his bed, Yoru focused his consciousness into his mental space. Your chakra control has increased 2-fold. Today, you have gained chakra of all 5 elemental natures. Upon hearing the rewards, Yoru nearly jumped out of bed. What? All 5 elemental chakra natures? This reward is incredible. Doesn't this mean I now have all 5 elemental chakra natures? I'm only missing yin and yang chakra natures. But even without those, just having all 5 elemental natures is already extraordinary. In the entire ninja world, very few shinobi possessed all 5 elemental chakra natures. Otherwise, Pikazu wouldn't have gone to such lengths to kill so many shinobi just to obtain them. Yoru never expected to acquire them all at once. How could he not be ecstatic? Previously, he didn't even know what his chakra nature was, but now it didn't matter. With all 5 elemental chakra natures, he could learn almost any ninjutsu, except those requiring yin or yang chakra. At this moment, Yoru was even more excited than when he unlocked the chakra restriction removal ability. After all, possessing all elemental chakra natures was practically a hallmark of the protagonists in the 4th Shinobi World War. Even though Naruto's primary chakra nature was wind, he and Sasuke eventually possessed all elemental chakra natures. At this rate, it's not impossible for me to gain yin and yang chakra in the future. This idol system is truly amazing. Yoru thought with awe. It's called an idol system, but I didn't expect it to provide so many abilities. Even Yoru couldn't have predicted just how much the system would change his life. Chapter 17 at Kion Toichi's home. Once again, Kakashi appeared on his balcony. Kion Toichi glanced at the figure on the balcony and shook his head. Kakashi, my house does have a door, you know. Kakashi ignored the remark, gazing at the moonlight outside as he casually asked, it seems you're quite pleased with that kid. I don't recall you ever participating in team dinners before. Kion Toichi walked onto the balcony. Seems like you're paying close attention to that kid as well. But you should know, he's my student. Kion Toichi said, looking at Kakashi. Kakashi chuckled lightly. Why so defensive? Are you worried I'm going to steal him from you? I am a little concerned. Kion Toichi admitted. After all, that kid is far more exceptional than I had anticipated. I'm guessing it was you in the woods earlier today, wasn't it? Kion Toichi had already noticed Kakashi's presence that day. After all, Kion Toichi was once a jonin in the Anbu, specializing in interrogation. Despite his focus on that field, his sensory abilities were top-notch. Using a shadow clone to train your students, if they found out, they'd probably feel hurt. Kion Toichi teased. And besides, none of your students are simple-minded. Kakashi wasn't fazed by the jab. Hey, that kid has changed you a lot. The old you wouldn't have said something like that. Kakashi remarked with a sigh. Yeah, that kid made me realize that if I don't teach him well, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Toichi admitted without hesitation. Kakashi was slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected Toichi to be so forthright, nor had he realized how highly Yuru was regarded in Toichi's eyes. But then he recalled Yuru fearlessly approaching the waterfall earlier that day, walking steadily even when he could have been struck down at any moment. Kakashi couldn't help but feel a tinge of envy toward Toichi. That kid's talent far exceeds mine, Kakashi said with a wry smile. Kakashi himself had once been considered a prodigy of Hidden Leaf Village. Graduating from the Ninja Academy at the age of 5, becoming a Chunin at 6, and achieving the rank of Jonin by 12, he had earned the nickname Kakashi of the Sharingan and gained fame throughout the ninja world. He was undeniably a once-in-a-generation genius. Even Itachi Uchiha paled slightly in comparison. He's still not on your level, Toichi countered. At 12, you were already a Jonin. Right now, he's just a rookie. Oh, come on. If he had the resources I did, he'd probably already be a Jonin too. Those 6 years at the academy held him back, Kakashi replied. Kakashi had always felt that Yuru hiding his talent during his time at the Ninja Academy was unwise. But then again, for someone so young to have no vanity and to conceal his talent so thoroughly was a feat even Kakashi couldn't have managed. In his own case, there had been no reason to do so. What do you plan to teach him? Are you going to start teaching him ninjutsu already? Kakashi asked, his gaze fixed on Toichi. Toichi was silent for a moment. I haven't decided yet. Honestly, I don't think my ninjutsu is suitable for him, Toichi admitted. Most of my techniques are related to interrogation, and I don't want him to end up in the Anbu. With a sigh, Toichi continued, I'd love to teach him some powerful combat ninjutsu, but honestly, I don't even know any myself. Other than some basic elemental ninjutsu, I don't know any powerful combat-oriented techniques, Toichi admitted. I really have no idea what I'll teach him once I've covered the fundamentals. Kakashi observed Toichi's troubled expression, then paused before saying, if you're willing, I can help you out. Toichi looked at Kakashi in surprise, his eyes filled with disbelief. You'd help me? Aren't you worried the Hokage might object? After all, the third Hokage had specifically entrusted Sasuke and Naruto to Kakashi, expecting him to train them thoroughly. If Kakashi diverted his attention to Yuru, the third Hokage would likely disapprove. Then let's make sure he doesn't find out, Kakashi replied nonchalantly. For the time being, most of our missions will be within the village. With that kid's talent, I'm confident I can elevate his ninjutsu abilities to a Jonin level before he's sent on missions outside the village. Toichi stared at Kakashi in disbelief. While he was aware that Kakashi held Yuru in high regard, he hadn't expected Kakashi to go to such lengths for him. Kakashi, also known as the Copy Ninja, was renowned for his mastery of over 1,000 jutsu thanks to his Sharingan. Even so, Toichi hoped to be the one to teach Yuru a ninjutsu. But when he considered the fact that, aside from a few B-rank jutsu, most of his A-rank techniques were interrogation-related, he realized they would be of little use to Yuru. Do you have any conditions? Toichi asked cautiously. He knew there was no such thing as a free lunch. My condition is simple. When we go on missions, there will be times when I'll need to borrow him, Kakashi replied. Toichi froze. You're not planning to take him on dangerous missions, are you? Kakashi nodded. You should know better than anyone that a sheltered environment doesn't produce strong individuals. When I was 12, I was already going on missions with the 4th Hokage. He was him, and you were you, Toichi retorted. You underwent extensive training before that. No matter how talented he is, he's still just a rookie fresh out of the Ninja Academy. And the missions you take aren't anything below B rank. I'm not letting my student risk his life with you. Toichi was visibly agitated. Kakashi's missions were not the relatively safe ones he handled with Naruto and the others but rather the high-stakes assignments he took on solo. As one of Hidden Leaf Village's elite Jonin, and one of the strongest at that, Kakashi often accepted missions that even regular Jonin found perilous. Though Yuru was exceptionally talented, he hadn't yet mastered any ninjutsu or experienced real combat. Toichi couldn't possibly agree to let him take such risks with Kakashi. But Kakashi had his reasons. Toichi, you should understand that exposing him to real danger early on will benefit his growth in the long run. In fact, it's already overdue, Kakashi said. Toichi remained firm. I won't agree to it. I want him to develop gradually, and I'll only let him go out when he's strong enough to handle it. Kakashi shook his head. You're making a mistake. He's not like ordinary people. Developing gradually will only make him mediocre. Do you want him to end up as just another average ninja? But I don't want him to die before me. Kion Toichi snapped, glaring at Kakashi. He truly regarded Yuru as his student. Even if his cautious approach meant Yuru wouldn't achieve his full potential, he couldn't bear the thought of Yuru risking his life on missions with Kakashi. Chapter 18 Calm down, Toichi. With me around, I'll ensure his safety. Kakashi said with a sigh. It was the first time he'd seen Kion Toichi so emotional. He could understand, though, Kion Toichi truly saw Yuru as his student. You? Toichi retorted. How many comrades have died alongside you? I know Anbu ninja are prepared for that day, but I don't want him to join the Anbu. I just want him to grow into a ninja who protects the village and lives freely under the sunlight. Kakashi fell silent. Toichi's words reminded him of Obito Uchiha and Nohara Rin, reopening old wounds he had carried for years. He's different from the others. Kakashi finally said. I'd take him with me to help him grow, not to treat him as a full-fledged teammate on missions. If the mission were truly dangerous, I wouldn't bring him along. Can you at least accept that? Kakashi had compromised, but Toichi still shook his head. Impossible. Don't even think about it. I won't let him take any risks until he has the ability to protect himself. You've changed a lot, Toichi. Kakashi said, his tone subdued. You weren't like this before. Toichi turned to him. And haven't you changed as well? You're not the same as you were in the Anbu. After that, both men fell silent. They had indeed changed. Because of Yuru. Both of them knew that with Yoru's talent, he would undoubtedly grow into a powerful protector of the village if taught properly. The issue was that their teaching philosophies didn't align. Unbeknownst to Yuru, the two were debating his future. I won't take him on missions until he has sufficient self-protection capabilities. Kakashi said finally. How about we make a deal? Once he's strong enough to defeat you, I'll take him out. Kakashi's serious gaze met Toichi's. Toichi considered it for a moment before nodding. The reason he agreed was that Toichi himself wasn't a combat-specialized ninja. In terms of combat, his strength was comparable to that of an average Jonin. But if Yuru could defeat him, it would at least prove that he had achieved Jonin-level strength. If anyone overheard their conversation, they would think it was absurd. After all, Toichi was a Jonin, while Yuru was merely a rookie fresh out of the ninja academy. Setting aside whether Yuru could defeat Toichi, even becoming a Jonin was a monumental task. Jonin were the elite among ninjas in any village. Not just anyone could reach that level. Becoming a Jonin meant possessing a baseline strength on par with others at that rank, regardless of specialization. And even among the 5 great shinobi villages, the total number of Jonin rarely exceeded 100 per village. In other words, Kakashi was proposing that Yuru reach Jonin-level strength, and defeat Toichi, within less than a year. To most, this would sound like an impossible dream. But to Kakashi and Toichi, who were familiar with Yoru's talent, it didn't seem so far-fetched. Both believed that by the time Yuru was allowed to take missions outside the village, he would possess Jonin-level strength. In Hidden Leaf Village, rookie teams typically performed village-based missions for 3 months before being sent on external assignments. The next day, after completing a D-rank mission, Yuru mastered the tree-climbing technique. Due to the pressure Yuru exerted, both Yamada Tamaki and Hanma Yataka worked extremely hard. However, their talents were average, and they were still unable to master the techniques taught by Kion Toichi. As Yuru was walking home in the evening, he suddenly stopped in the middle of a street. With his enhanced sensory abilities, he surveyed the empty street, his expression serious. Even though there was no one in sight, Yuru felt an instinctive sense of danger. Something told him that continuing down the path would be very risky. Just as Yuru was about to turn and take another route, dozens of kunai and shuriken suddenly flew toward him. The whistling sound of the kunai and shuriken as they cut through the air made Yoru's heart skip a beat. Vroom clang clang clang. In an instant, as the dozens of weapons were about to strike, Yuru narrowed his eyes and, with a blink, disappeared from his original position. The kunai and shuriken missed and embedded themselves into the wall several meters away. Sparks flew as the weapons, with great force, stuck firmly into the wall. The power of those projectiles was terrifying. Had they struck a human, they would have pierced through flesh and bone in an instant. Yuru, now several meters away from the original spot, looked back at the place where the kunai and shuriken had landed. He couldn't help but gasp. Hiss. If I had been hit, I would have been done for. Unbeknownst to Yuru, the person who had thrown the weapons, perched on a tree several dozen meters away, was equally stunned. That speed. It's already at the level of the body flicker jutsu. This kid's got a sharp mind. Just now, Yuru had concentrated his chakra under his feet and, in an instant, ran several meters away, just like the body flicker jutsu. Yet, Yuru had never actually learned the body flicker jutsu. This showed just how impressive his chakra control and physical strength were. Snapping back to reality, Yuru looked toward the direction of the attacker. At the moment, the area was deserted. Yuru drew a kunai and adopted a battle stance. This place isn't safe. I need to find a chance to escape. From the attack just now, I can tell this person is far stronger than I am. In an instant, Yuru had analyzed the disparity in strength between them. But at this moment, he didn't dare to turn his back. He knew that if he did, the attacker would immediately take the opportunity to stab him from behind. Yuru had no intention of engaging in a prolonged battle. Right now, he didn't know any ninjutsu, and his taijutsu wasn't particularly strong either. It would be impossible to fight back against such an attacker with only the few basic techniques he had learned. Yuru was fully aware of this from the start. The only question now was how to escape. For a moment, the surroundings fell into stillness. Only the evening breeze blew through the air. There weren't even any streetlights in this area, and the darkness sent a chill down Yoru's spine. Yuru kept his eyes fixed on the direction of the attacker. He could already sense the general location of the threat, but he didn't dare make any sudden moves. Suddenly, Yuru felt a fluctuation of chakra behind him. Too fast. Yuru froze. In the blink of an eye, the attacker appeared behind him. He hadn't even reacted in time. But in that split second, Yuru snapped back to his senses. This time, he didn't use the body flicker jutsu to escape. He was fully aware that the attacker was faster than him. Attempting to use the body flicker again would be suicidal. In that instant, Yuru turned and performed a whip-like kick. Boom, there was a muffled sound, and the shadow behind him was instantly blasted away, transforming into a puff of white smoke. Shit, it's a clone. Yuru cursed inwardly. Earth-style, mud swamp jutsu. Suddenly, Yuru felt the ground beneath him give way. The street below him turned into thick, sticky mud, and the mud quickly began to pull him down into its depths. At this moment, half of his body was already submerged in the swamp. And the more he struggled, the further he sank. Chapter 19. In just 3 seconds, only Yoru's head remained above the ground. However, the hidden attacker still didn't show up. As expected, when the swamp finally submerged Yoru's head, a puff of white smoke appeared. The Yuru trapped in the swamp transformed into a log. Hey, a substitution technique? Quite the masterful application of the ninjutsu he's learned. It turned out that Yuru had used the substitution jutsu to evade the attacker's earth style. At that moment, Yoru's real body had already moved several meters away. But he wasn't at ease at all. His expression was grim as he stared toward where the attacker might be. This guy is way too strong. Right now, I don't stand a chance against him. Who is he? I don't think I have any enemies. I don't even know many people in the village. Who would want to harm me? Yuru was frustrated. The recent ninjutsu attacks were clearly meant to kill him. What kind of grudge or hatred was this? He couldn't recall offending anyone this powerful. While Yuru was racking his brain, trying to figure out who might be attacking him, a figure stepped out from the dark forest. Not bad, not bad. It seems you've already reached the level of a chunin. Seeing this person, Yuru became even more tense. It was too dark, and the person was masked, so he couldn't recognize who it was. But the presence this person exuded was immense, several times stronger than Yoru's teacher. If this guy really wanted to kill me, there's no way I'd still be standing here. But what's his purpose? This is the village. Would he really dare to kill someone in the open? Although ninjas often carried out assassination missions, this was the village, a place with order. Even ninjas couldn't harm others at will here. And with this person's strength, if he wanted to kill Yuru, it wouldn't be so complicated. Yuru was fully aware that this person could kill him instantly. While Yuru was deep in thought, the person had already approached him. I don't think I've offended you, have I? Yuru asked, still refraining from making a move. He wanted to know who this person was. The attacker glanced at Yuru and said calmly, "Come with me." With that, the person turned and began walking away. In that instant, Yuru had the urge to turn and run. But considering the vast difference in their strength, he abandoned the idea. He probably doesn't want to kill me, otherwise, I'd already be dead after that last attack. But what does he want? Unable to figure it out, Yuru hesitated for a moment before following. There was no other choice, he couldn't match this person, who could easily kill him. Resistance was futile. Moreover, Yuru wanted to know who this person was and what his purpose might be. Under the cover of night, the two walked one after the other, separated by about 10 meters, until they reached the back mountain of Hidden Leaf Village. When they entered the back mountain, Yuru initially didn't want to follow. But in the end, he went along. He had deduced that this person probably wouldn't kill him. They arrived at the lake Yuru and his team had cleaned the day before. Under the moonlight, the person's white hair made Yuru narrow his eyes. Could this guy be Kakashi Hatake? Yuru carefully observed the figure, and the resemblance became more apparent. No way. I don't think I've offended him. Could it be that Sensei Toichi offended him during his time in the Anbu? And now he's here to teach me a lesson. Revenge on my teacher? After guessing that the person was Kakashi, Yuru became convinced it was because Makamoto Toichi had offended Kakashi during his time in the Anbu, and Kakashi was retaliating against him to send a warning. However, since the person was likely Kakashi, Yuru also concluded that he wouldn't be in any real danger. And as it turned out, the person was indeed Kakashi. Earlier that day, Kakashi had been leading Naruto and Sasuke on a mission, though it was mostly Naruto and Sasuke completing the task while Kakashi read his book on the sidelines. Kakashi was, after all, a devoted fan of Jiraiya's novels. When they reached the lakeside, Kakashi removed his mask. Yuru breathed a sigh of relief. Good, it really is Kakashi. Confirming it was Kakashi, Yuru stayed silent. He wanted to know what kind of grudge or issue Kakashi might have with his teacher. After all, Kakashi's attacks just now would have left any ordinary genin as a corpse. Yuru didn't hold it against Kakashi. He understood that if Kakashi was acting out of revenge for his teacher, then Kakashi must have already gauged his strength. Otherwise, someone like Kakashi wouldn't attack randomly. Kakashi wasn't some kind of villain. In fact, Yuru found himself curious, wondering what sort of conflict existed between his teacher and Kakashi during their Anbu days. For a while, neither of them spoke. The atmosphere grew awkward. After a long silence, Kakashi was the one to break it. Yuru, your performance just now wasn't bad. Yuru didn't respond. He simply stood there, watching Kakashi strike a contemplative pose by the lake. Not getting the reaction he expected, Kakashi felt a little awkward. But as an elite Jonin, he quickly composed himself. Are you wondering why I attacked you? Yuru nodded. I imagine Kakashi-sensei wouldn't attack me just because he was bored, right? He replied. Kakashi looked slightly embarrassed. Yuru didn't seem particularly curious about his intentions. In fact, he wasn't flustered like he had been earlier when defending against Kakashi's attacks. Instead, he appeared remarkably calm, even calmer than Kakashi himself. Not even Sasuke would act this way. Sasuke's usual composure came from his prideful and aloof demeanor. But Yoru's calmness seemed genuine, as if everything were under his control. In truth, Yuru had no idea what was going on. His composure came solely from the fact that it was Kakashi, and he was confident that Kakashi wouldn't harm him. Yoru's understanding of Kakashi put him completely at ease. He also believed that Kakashi's actions must have something to do with his teacher. After all, Yuru had never had much interaction with Kakashi before. But his teacher, being a former Anbu ninja, might have had some history with Kakashi. Not seeing the reaction he was hoping for, Kakashi felt a tinge of disappointment. Nevertheless, he didn't forget his purpose for being there. Turning around, Kakashi stood under the moonlight, his silver hair shining conspicuously. My earlier attacks would have been impossible for an average Chunin to defend against. This shows that your strength has already surpassed that of most Chunin. Kakashi said. But that's about it. If I had increased the intensity of my attacks, you would have been defeated. Yuru nodded. That's correct. Kakashi-sensei is a Jonin, and I can sense that you could have defeated me from the start. I don't have any chance of resisting you. I'm well aware of that. Yuru had no doubts about it. He understood very clearly that if Kakashi truly wanted to take him down, he wouldn't even have a chance to fight back. Although the rank difference between Chunin and Jonin was technically just one level, the disparity in strength was like heaven and earth. During the mission in the Land of Waves, two Chunin had been nothing but clowns before Kakashi. He'd used them and then instantly eliminated them. Yuru wouldn't be foolish enough to think he could challenge Kakashi just because he was praised for having Chunin-level strength. Chapter 20 Kakashi smiled slightly and nodded. Not bad, you have a clear sense of self-awareness. As he spoke, Kakashi's expression turned serious as he looked at Yuru. I used to work alongside your teacher. Did you know that? Yuru stayed silent, though he had already guessed as much. Kakashi didn't press further but instead shared the decision he and Makamoto Toichi had made regarding Yuru. So, what do you think about it? Although the two of them could decide Yoru's future on their own, Kakashi still wanted to hear Yoru's thoughts. After thinking for a moment, Yuru replied, I don't think I really have a choice in the matter, do I? No, I want to know what you think. Your opinion is important. Kakashi said. I don't have any strong feelings about it. Having another teacher isn't a bad thing. Yuru said nonchalantly. Kakashi looked a bit puzzled. Aren't you happy about this? After all, knowing your teacher's background, you should understand how rare it is to have an Anbu Jonin as your mentor. I do understand. It's just that having another teacher doesn't particularly excite me. Yuru said calmly. His words left Kakashi even more perplexed. Kakashi began to wonder if Yuru didn't like him. I believe my skills could teach you a lot, Kakashi said. Yuru nodded. I'm sure of that. After all, you're Kakashi-sensei. From all the rumors I've heard, it's clear how capable you are. For once, Yuru wasn't relying on his memories from his previous life. Kakashi's reputation in Hidden Leaf Village was well known, except to someone as oblivious as Naruto. Any normal ninja had heard of Kakashi's legendary status. Kakashi grew even more confused. If Yuru knew how formidable he was, why was he acting so indifferent? Kakashi-sensei, for me, living a stable life as a ninja is what matters most. I don't have any burning desire to become a great powerhouse, Yuru said. This was both a truth and a lie. The truth was that Yuru genuinely didn't have much ambition. His primary effort was focused on surviving and living peacefully in this world. The lie was that he had a system. He knew that even without a mentor, he could still become powerful, it would just take more time and effort. Kakashi felt speechless. Yoru's attitude was almost too unambitious. But then Kakashi thought of himself. Did he even have the right to criticize Yoru for it? Don't you have a dream? Kakashi couldn't help but ask. Yoru chuckled. My dream is to live through my ninja career safely. You of all people should know how short the average lifespan of a ninja is. Yoru's words left Kakashi even more at a loss for words. What he said was true, but Yoru was different, or at least Kakashi thought so. In Kakashi's eyes, Yoru was a prodigy, someone destined to become a key force in protecting Hidden Leaf Village. Such a mindset felt utterly lacking in ambition. Don't you have anything you want to protect? Kakashi pressed on, unwilling to give up. He wanted Yoru to at least have some kind of goal to strive toward. From his experience, a ninja without aspirations would never achieve greatness. Yoru thought for a moment and said, of course, I do. If I have enough strength, I naturally want to protect the things I hold dear. At last, Kakashi smiled. Then I'll teach you how to gain that strength. Why did you say such defeatist things earlier? Yoru shook his head. Kakashi-sensei, I don't think what I said was defeatist. I simply said I want to live through my ninja career peacefully. That doesn't mean I'm unwilling to work hard. To live a stable life, you need to become strong. But as long as I can protect the things most precious to me, that's enough. There's no need to endlessly pursue greater strength. Whether I succeed or not doesn't concern me. Just doing my best is enough. Kakashi chuckled wryly. You're so young, yet you speak like an old man. Alright, I won't bother introducing myself formally. I imagine you already know a bit about me. After all, you're not like Naruto. Sasuke and Naruto truly didn't know much about Kakashi. Naruto was understandable, but Sasuke, despite being from the Uchiha clan and Kakashi having worked closely with Itachi, also knew little about him. Kakashi often wondered if Itachi had deliberately never mentioned him to Sasuke. And Kakashi was right, Itachi hadn't told Sasuke much about his Anbu life, let alone Kakashi. Kakashi stepped closer to Yoru. In the moonlight, his 180 centimeters frame was only a head taller than the 12-year-old Yoru, who was already around 160 centimeters. Compared to the other kids, most of whom were under 150 centimeters, Yoru was quite tall. Despite Kakashi's usual aloof demeanor, he didn't seem so distant standing in front of Yoru. He patted Yoru on the shoulder, his tone serious. From today onward, I'm also your teacher. And I expect you to reach the level of a Jonin within a year, or even half a year. When you do, I'll take you on solo missions with me. Yoru, usually expressionless, blinked in surprise. Take me on missions? Reach Jonin level in 6 months? Yoru's lips twitched. Sensei, you have a lot of confidence in me, don't you? Who could possibly achieve Jonin level in 6 months? Also, you must know what kind of missions you handle. They're far beyond the reach of ordinary ninja, aren't they? Although Yoru felt that his system would help him grow quickly, he wasn't arrogant enough to believe he could reach Jonin level in just 6 months. He understood that the gap between a Chunin and a Jonin wasn't merely a single rank. Especially when it came to someone like Kakashi, who wasn't just any Jonin. While Chunin and Jonin were only 1 rank apart, the combat power disparity was like heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, a single Jonin could easily crush a group of Chunin. Without external advantages, a Chunin facing a Jonin was essentially doomed. Moreover, having the raw strength of a Jonin wasn't enough. One also needed extensive combat experience to truly match the rank. This was something Yoru valued greatly. While ninjutsu could be practiced, combat experience had to be earned through actual battles. Yoru was well aware of how Kaguya Otsutsuki was ultimately sealed by Naruto and Sasuke. The essence of her defeat was her lack of combat experience. Despite her overwhelming power, She'd been sealed for millennia, rendering her naive and rusty. In the end, she was resealed, tarnishing the reputation of a final boss. In truth, this flaw was common among the Otsutsuki clan. They relied purely on overwhelming strength to crush their enemies. Against vastly weaker opponents, this worked splendidly. But facing an opponent only one rank lower or equally matched, especially one with rich combat experience, they were highly likely to lose. Yuru understood that his current combat experience was virtually zero. Achieving Jonin level strength would take much longer. In truth, Yoru's standards for himself were exceedingly high. During Kakashi's earlier surprise attack, Yuru had already displayed skills far beyond those of an average Chunin. The reason he felt a vast gap between himself and Kakashi wasn't due to combat experience, it was the sheer difference in raw strength. But Yuru mistakenly attributed this gap to a lack of experience. Thanks to the exceptional talent for learning ninjutsu granted by his system, Yoru's combat ability was already far above average. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to surpass most Chunin using just a few newly learned basic jutsu. Chapter 21. Seeing Yoru's reaction, Kakashi was somewhat surprised. You really are different from others. Most kids would feel proud and think they're amazing after hearing such words, thinking I have high expectations for them. But you don't show even a trace of arrogance. Kakashi hadn't expected Yoru to be so composed and mature. Yoru frowned slightly. Thinking you're amazing just because of that would be wrong. I'm very aware of my abilities. Reaching Jonin level in 6 months? Impossible. And going on missions with you? Even less likely. I'd like to keep living, after all. Kakashi chuckled. But Toichi and I both believe you have that potential. Then you're both overestimating me. I don't have that kind of ability. Yoru said, shaking his head. Well, whether you have that ability or not, we'll only know after testing it. Kakashi didn't dwell on the topic further. He genuinely believed Yoru could achieve Jonin level skills in 6 months. Without saying more, Kakashi pulled a small piece of paper from his ninja tool pouch. Handing it to Yoru, he said, this is a Chakra nature paper. It will reveal your Chakra nature. Yoru hesitated for a moment before taking the paper, though Kakashi didn't notice his hesitation. In truth, Yoru didn't want Kakashi to know he possessed all 5 Chakra natures. In the ninja world, having all 5 Chakra natures was exceedingly rare. Even in Hidden Leaf Village, the only ones Yoru knew of were Kakashi and the 3rd Hokage. Just channel your Chakra into it, and you'll see. Go ahead and try. Kakashi instructed. Yoru's gaze sharpened slightly, and in an instant, his Chakra surged into the paper. Kakashi's eyes locked onto the paper in Yoru's hand, eager to see how many Chakra natures Yoru had. Most people only had 1 nature, and those with 2 were already exceptional. Even many Jonin started with only 1 Chakra nature, and any additional natures were usually acquired through rigorous training. However, Chakra natures acquired through training were naturally much weaker than those one was born with. Kakashi secretly hoped Yoru had lightning nature Chakra so he could teach him the Chidori. The moment Yoru infused his Chakra into the paper, it instantly reacted. The paper split cleanly in 2. One half became damp as water soaked through it, while the other half crumpled up. Then, a small flame ignited a portion of the crumpled paper, burning a hole through it, while the remaining parts disintegrated into powder like crushed stone. Kakashi was utterly dumbfounded, left speechless. Yoru, too, was momentarily stunned. Although he already knew he had all 5 Chakra natures, this was the first time he had confirmed it in practice. Once Kakashi recovered, he stared at Yoru with an expression of shock. You actually possess all 5 Chakra natures. This is incredible. It's been so many years since a ninja with all 5 Chakra natures appeared in Hidden Leaf Village. Yoru, you're destined to become a ninja as great as the 4th Hokage. Seeing Kakashi's excited expression, Yoru felt at a loss for words. While he knew his abilities were special, the enthusiasm Kakashi showed was overwhelming. Having 5 Chakra natures was indeed impressive, but Kakashi himself also had all 5 Chakra natures. Was it really worth getting so excited over? Moreover, Kakashi compared Yoru to the 4th Hokage. Though Yoru believed he would eventually surpass the 4th Hokage, at the moment, the man still felt like an unattainable figure. Kakashi-sensei, aren't you exaggerating? Is it really that rare to have these Chakra natures? Yoru chose not to reveal his understanding of Chakra natures. This kind of knowledge wasn't something a genin was expected to have. Although the Ninja Academy covered basic Chakra nature theory, Chakra paper wasn't included in their curriculum, and he'd certainly never used it before. Yoru's question pulled Kakashi back to reality. Kakashi smiled. You don't understand. Having all 5 Chakra natures means you possess every Chakra attribute. Isn't that something worth getting excited about? At the time, Kakashi didn't know much about yin and yang attributes either. He assumed Yuru would be as thrilled as he was to learn about his Chakra abilities. But to his surprise, Yuru remained calm and simply nodded. That's not bad. Does it mean I can learn ninjutsu from all the Chakra natures? Kakashi felt at a loss. You don't seem surprised at all. Yoru's expression stayed neutral, showing no hint of excitement. What's there to be surprised about? I'm only interested in whether I can learn ninjutsu from all the natures. Kakashi shook his head. You really are different from other kids your age. But fine, you're right. With 5 Chakra natures, you can learn ninjutsu from all of them. Do you know how rare it is to have all 5 Chakra natures? Based on how excited you were just now, I'd say it's pretty uncommon. Yoru replied. Kakashi nodded. Exactly. It's extremely rare. That's why I was so excited earlier. As far as I know, in Hidden Leaf Village, the only people with all 5 Chakra natures are you, me, and the 3rd Hokage. Yoru smiled faintly. So you also have all 5 Chakra natures, sensei? Well, that makes sense, given your nickname as the Copy Ninja. Without the corresponding Chakra natures, copying your opponent's jutsu would be pretty difficult, wouldn't it? Kakashi nodded. Exactly. While the Sharingan allows me to copy many techniques, it's not omnipotent. If the user doesn't have the corresponding Chakra nature, certain jutsu can't be copied. Also, forbidden jutsu and Kekkei Genkai techniques are beyond its scope. Taijutsu is also challenging to replicate. Kakashi, clearly valuing Yoru, explained the Sharingan's limitations in detail. Although it wasn't a big secret, most ordinary ninjas weren't privy to such specifics. For a genin like Yoru, this kind of knowledge was even more unlikely to be known. This demonstrated just how much Kakashi trusted him. Yoru, of course, already knew these things, so he wasn't particularly surprised. Kakashi patted Yoru's shoulder with satisfaction. Starting today, I'll subject you to the harshest training to ensure you master all the necessary ninjutsu as quickly as possible. You'd better be prepared for it. Yoru nodded. I don't mind. But I can only promise to give it my best effort. Kakashi smiled, clearly pleased. Yoru's potential was extraordinary. He was like an unpolished gem, one that only needed a bit of refining to shine brilliantly. Chapter 22. Kakashi was in high spirits, but Yoru couldn't help asking, Kakashi-sensei, do you really have time to teach me? You're still Naruto and the others' mentor, after all. Kakashi waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry. I'll do my best to coordinate my time for both. Yoru decided not to dwell on how Kakashi would manage it. That's good, then. We'll start tomorrow. From now on, every evening, you come here. I'll be waiting for you. Unless something urgent comes up, you're expected to show up every day. Can you promise that? Kakashi's gaze met Yoru's. Yoru nodded. I don't see any problem with that. After all, Yoru didn't have much to do each day, nor did he have any friends. The two chatted for a while longer before parting ways. On the way back, Yoru felt as though he was in some sort of surreal dream. He thought to himself, Kakashi actually agreed to teach me? Is this thanks to my connection with Kion-sensei? Yoru figured that if it weren't for Kion Toichi being Kakashi's colleague, Kakashi would never have agreed to mentor him. However, he was wrong. Yoru had no idea how much his talent had shocked Kakashi. Kakashi's decision to oversee Team 7 had been more out of obligation to the 3rd Hokage's request than personal interest. After all, Kakashi had been a direct disciple of the 4th Hokage, as well as the leader of the 4th's personal ambush squad. Not to mention, during the time Naruto's mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was pregnant with Naruto, Kakashi had served as her personal guard. Considering Naruto's status as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, having Kakashi, the strongest Jonin in Hidden Leaf Village at the time, mentor him seemed like the best choice. Team 7 also included Sasuke Uchiha. Although the 3rd Hokage bore significant responsibility for the Uchiha clan's destruction due to his indecision, he still hoped to nurture Sasuke. With Kakashi's expertise in developing the Sharingan, he was an ideal choice. Even though Kakashi didn't mind teaching Team 7, it wasn't something he had volunteered for. But with Yoru, it was different. Kakashi genuinely liked the boy. Yoru's talent reminded him of himself at that age, perhaps even surpassing it. What set Yoru apart was his calm and humble demeanor. Kakashi, despite not appearing outwardly arrogant in his youth, had been inwardly proud. After all, his achievements were extraordinary, graduating from the Ninja Academy at 5, becoming a Chunin at 6, and a Jonin at 12. Such feats were rare even across the entire ninja world. Yet he believed Yoru's talent exceeded his own. Because of this, Kakashi had high hopes for Yoru. The more gifted a ninja was, the greater the consequences if they weren't properly guided. Kakashi had even gone so far as to personally request Kion Toichi to let him train Yuru, not just because he admired the boy, but because he wanted to ensure Yuru wouldn't stray down the wrong path. After parting ways with Yuru, Kakashi headed straight to Kion Toichi's place. When Kion saw Kakashi standing on his balcony, he sighed and shook his head. "Can't you use the door like a normal person?" Kakashi leaned casually against the balcony railing. "I've already made arrangements with him. His talent is far greater than we initially realized." Kion paused in surprise, then smiled knowingly. "I can't say I'm too surprised." Kakashi smiled back. "I think this will still catch you off guard." "Oh?" Kion turned to Kakashi with curiosity. Kakashi gazed out at the trees beyond and said, "I tested his current strength a bit. His performance surprised me. I'm afraid even an average Chunin wouldn't be a match for him now. This morning, he had just learned to control Chakra with you. But when he sparred with me, he wielded it with remarkable skill and precision. Right now, he's already at the level of a Chunin, and not just any Chunin, he's stronger than most. What he lacks now are offensive ninjutsu. Once he masters those, his strength might quickly rival yours." Kakashi's tone carried a trace of disbelief. Even now, he found it hard to fully process. Yoru's talent was simply overwhelming, far beyond what Kakashi had anticipated. Kion Toichi smiled. "That kid." Though surprised, Kion couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and relief. After all, he truly regarded Yuru as his personal disciple. If he were better at combat himself, he would never have entrusted Yoru's training to Kakashi. Kakashi continued, "And there's something else you wouldn't expect." "Oh?" "Yuru possesses all 5 chakra natures." The look of contentment on Kion's face froze in an instant. "What? He has all 5 chakra natures?" Kion was stunned. While Yoru's strength being at the level of a Chunin was surprising, it was still within the realm of imagination. But having all 5 chakra natures? That was an extraordinary rarity. In most cases, possessing all 5 chakra natures was tied to innate bloodline traits. The rarity of such individuals surpassed even that of many ninja with KK Genkai. Currently, in Hidden Leaf Village, only Kakashi and the 3rd Hokage were known to have all 5 chakra natures. In fact, possessing all 5 chakra natures could itself be considered a kind of KK Genkai. Kion's gaze sharpened. "You didn't tell anyone about this, did you?" Kakashi shook his head. "I understand how sensitive this is." "Of course, I didn't say anything." While having all 5 chakra natures was an incredible gift, it was precisely because it was so rare that it could make Yuru a target. Both Kakashi and Kion, having previously been in Anbu, understood that Hidden Leaf Village wasn't just a village of sunshine, it also had shadows hidden beneath its roots. And Yuru, being a civilian without the protection of a clan, could easily fall prey to those seeking to exploit his abilities, even for human experimentation. Kion let out a sigh of relief. "When you teach him, make sure he only uses jutsu from 2 chakra natures in public. That should suffice." Kakashi nodded. "I'll make sure to warn him." On this matter, Kakashi and Kion were in complete agreement. Until Yuru could protect himself, no one must discover that he possessed all 5 chakra natures. After returning home, Yuru lay on his bed and sank his consciousness into his inner mental space. Before long, a voice echoed in his mind, "You've been idle for a day. Chakra has doubled, physical strength increased by 1%, and speed has doubled." When Yuru came to, he felt an overwhelming sense of comfort coursing through his body. Reflecting on the changes, Yoru's lips curled into a faint smile. "My chakra has grown tremendously. It's practically on par with Kakashi's now. And my speed doubled. Is that because I clumsily practiced the body flicker jutsu?" The standard body flicker jutsu was relatively easy to learn, with a straightforward principle, channeling chakra to the soles of one's feet to enhance mobility. It was classified as a D-rank technique, something any genin could typically learn. Chapter 23 The Mech Jonin instructor is Kion Toichi. I fixed the last chapter. Happy readings. What surprised Yuru the most was the rapid increase in his chakra. His chakra levels were now nearing Kakashi's. It was worth noting that even among Jonin, Kakashi's chakra reserves were considered quite high. The reason he often seemed to lack chakra during battles was due to the incompatibility between his body and the Sharingan. Since he didn't possess the Uchiha bloodline, his body couldn't fully adapt to the Sharingan, which consumed a massive amount of chakra that couldn't be deactivated. Without the Sharingan's drain, Kakashi's chakra reserves would easily rival those of most Kage-level shinobi. At just 12 years old, he could casually perform the Earth-style wall. A B-rank jutsu with a range of dozens of meters. This showcased just how vast his chakra reserves were without the Sharingan's limitations. Yet, Yuru now had chakra reserves almost equivalent to Kakashi's, a feat that was astonishing. The increase in chakra also greatly enhanced Yoru's physical strength and mental energy. While most people extracted chakra from their own bodies, Yoru's chakra was drawn from the natural world. This meant that the more chakra he accumulated, the more it nourished his body. After all, Yoru's chakra was transformed from natural energy. To handle such an enormous amount of chakra, his body needed to have the durability to sustain it. I wonder if this rapid growth in chakra is just because I'm starting out. As my chakra levels grow, the rate of increase might slow down. Yoru mused. He thought that his chakra was growing so quickly because his foundation was still weak, and his initial reserves were relatively small. What he failed to consider was that his current chakra levels were already comparable to Kakashi's at over 20 years old, despite the fact that he was only 12. Even Naruto, without counting the Nine Tails chakra, had chakra reserves only about equal to Kakashi's. This was primarily due to the four-symbol seal placed by the fourth Hokage, which converted the leaked Nine Tails chakra into Naruto's own. It was evident how terrifyingly large Yoru's chakra reserves had become. The next day, after completing a D-rank mission with Toichi, Yoru found Kakashi already waiting for him at the training ground. Kakashi stood on a tree in the training ground, holding a book. Toichi couldn't help but sigh. "You're in such a hurry. Did you really think I wouldn't let Yoru go?" Although he knew Kakashi was going to train Yoru, he hadn't expected him to be this impatient. They had just finished their mission, yet Kakashi was already waiting at the training ground. By then, Jumoku and Tanako had already gone home. Toichi had initially planned to keep Yoru back to teach him some ninjutsu. While he wasn't skilled in combat, some interrogation-based ninjutsu could still be useful. However, Kakashi didn't give him the chance. Standing beside Toichi, Yoru looked up at Kakashi perched on the tree, feeling slightly awkward. Although he knew Toichi had already agreed to Kakashi's training, having both teachers present gave him a faint sense of betrayal toward Toichi. Kakashi closed the novel in his hand and jumped down from the tree. "I didn't take on any missions today, so I have the time," he explained. "Let's go, Yoru," Kakashi said, walking over to him. Yoru glanced at Toichi. Kakashi added calmly, "Your teacher has already agreed." Toichi, although somewhat helpless, had originally wanted to teach Yoru a ninjutsu. However, now that Kakashi had arrived, he had no choice but to let Yoru go. He patted Yoru on the shoulder and said, "Make sure to learn well. This guy may seem laid back, but his strength is no joke. In Hidden Leaf Village, aside from the third Hokage, he's already the strongest ninja." Since Tsunade and Jiraiya were not in Hidden Leaf Village, Toichi's words were not far from the truth. After speaking, Toichi turned and vanished into the distance. He feared that if he stayed any longer, he might be tempted to keep Yoru. Looking at the spot where Toichi had disappeared, Yoru remarked, "Teacher Toichi really holds Kakashi-sensei in high regard." Kakashi gave a faint smile. "He wants you to grow stronger, to become a pillar that can protect the village." Seizing the opportunity, Kakashi began a brief lecture. Yoru didn't mind it and nodded. "I won't disappoint him." "Kakashi-sensei, didn't you guys accept a mission today?" Yoru asked. Kakashi nodded. "Yes, we just completed a mission, so I gave them a break." "Alright, before we start training, let's grab something to eat. It's hard to train on an empty stomach." Yoru looked at Kakashi, surprised. "Kakashi-sensei, you don't expect me to treat you, do you?" Yoru was well aware that Kakashi was notoriously stingy. Kakashi blinked in confusion at Yoru's surprised expression, feeling a little awkward. It seemed his stinginess had been noticed. However, he truly hadn't expected Yoru to treat him. "Why would you think that?" Kakashi asked. "Let's go." "Of course, I'll treat you." Yoru's lips twitched slightly. "I hope so." It wasn't that Yoru minded treating Kakashi, but he was living off the inheritance left by his parents and had just completed a D-rank mission, so he didn't have much money. However, since Kakashi was going to teach him ninjutsu, it made sense for Kakashi to treat him. Kakashi sighed. "Is that how you see me?" Yoru gave him a wry smile as they walked. Soon, the two arrived at the Akiraku ramen shop. When the owner, Taki, saw Kakashi, he greeted him warmly. "Ah, Kakashi." Kakashi was well known in Hidden Leaf Village, but Taki was a bit surprised when he saw Yoru. After all, Yoru hadn't had much interaction with Kakashi before. "Yoru, what would you like to eat?" Taki's daughter, asked, leaning on the counter as she smiled. Yoru smiled back. "I'll have a bowl of tonkatsu ramen." Kakashi sat next to Yoru. "Is one bowl enough?" Yoru nodded. Since Yoru didn't extract chakra from his body, he didn't need food to replenish his energy. Kakashi seemed doubtful. "Don't forget, there will be intense training later. One bowl of ramen won't cut it." It's fine, 1 bowl is enough. Yuru was very clear about his situation. But Kakashi still turned to Taki and said, give him 2 more bowls. 3 bowls of tonkatsu ramen, and I'll have 3 bowls of beef ramen. Kakashi knew how exhausting the upcoming training would be, and he suspected Yuru didn't quite understand that. Although Yuru was reluctant, he could only accept it. After all, he couldn't explain that he didn't rely on his body's energy to maintain chakra. The exchange between Kakashi and Yuru left Taki in a state of shock. He could tell that Kakashi treated Yuru differently than others, almost like a father with his child. But before, these two hadn't had any interaction. He couldn't quite figure it out. Nevertheless, Taki knew better than to ask about ninja matters. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to run his business for decades without it shutting down. Chapter 24. Soon, 6 bowls of steaming hot ramen were brought to the table. Yuru turned to look at Kakashi. Kakashi, feeling puzzled, asked, what are you looking at me for? Hurry up and eat. Yuru didn't say anything. It didn't take long for Kakashi to realize what Yuru was thinking. He sighed with exasperation. So, you're that bored, huh? He knew Yuru was curious to see his face under the mask. Yuru smiled. Curiosity. Although Kakashi was undoubtedly handsome, Yuru really wanted to know just how handsome he was, enough to make Taki and Aizen look at him with starry eyes. Kakashi shook his head and slowly removed his mask, revealing his true face. When Yuru saw Kakashi's true face, he was momentarily stunned. Kakashi-sensei, Kakashi. No wonder you wear the mask. If you didn't, all the girls in Hidden Leaf Village would be crowding outside your door. Kakashi was indeed very handsome, and Yuru understood very well how much of an impact Kakashi's looks had on girls. As expected, when Taki and Aizen saw Kakashi's true face, their eyes immediately filled with admiration. Kakashi shook his head and began eating his ramen. Eat up. Yuru didn't argue and began eating as well. However, just as he was halfway through his meal, a few people walked in. At first, Yuru didn't pay much attention, but when they saw Kakashi, one of them suddenly shouted, startling Yuru to the point where he almost pulled out his kunai to prepare for a fight. Yo, Kakashi. Didn't expect to see you here. Yuru turned to look at the newcomers, feeling a little annoyed. Kakashi felt the same way, staring at the person in front of him, wearing a full green spandex suit and grinning widely, flashing a set of blinding white teeth. He sighed. Guy. The person was none other than Might Guy. Behind him were his 3 students, Neji Hyuga, Rock Lee, and Ten. The moment they entered, Neji's eyes were fixed on Yuru. What Yuru didn't know was that Neji had noticed him as soon as he came in. Neji felt an intense sense of threat from Yuru. He couldn't shake the feeling that this person in front of him could pose a real threat. It was something he'd never felt from his peers before. Guy casually sat next to Kakashi, while Neji and the others sat beside Yuru. Once they sat down, Guy noticed Yoru's presence. He glanced at Kakashi and seemed surprised. Kakashi, is this your student? Since Guy had been away on missions, he didn't know who Kakashi's students were. Kakashi hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yes. Guy didn't notice Kakashi's expression and, hearing that Yuru was Kakashi's student, immediately laughed. Kakashi, your student looks pretty energetic. How about learning some taijutsu from me? Kakashi twitched his lips. No, thanks. I'll teach him myself. Guy laughed heartily, knowing that he was just joking. Of course, if Yuru really wanted to learn from him, he would be happy to teach. There were few taijutsu practitioners in the ninja world, so having one more was something Guy was always happy about. Moreover, if Yuru learned taijutsu from Guy, that would mean he had beaten Kakashi in this area, and Guy was more than happy with that. Ten, sitting next to Yuru, was curiously watching him. Hello, I'm Ten. You're Kakashi-sensei's student, right? Hello, I'm Yuru. He replied. Upon seeing Tenten and Yuru greet each other, Rock Lee and Neji also approached. I'm Rock Lee, a student of Guy-sensei. My goal is to defeat geniuses as a ninja. Lee declared, flashing a bright, gleaming smile. This expression mirrored Guy's perfectly, making Yuru feel slightly awkward. Neji, standing to the side, spoke calmly, I'm Neji Hyuga. I sense there's something unusual about you. His words were straightforward, and Yuru couldn't ignore the peculiar impression Neji had of him. Yuru chuckled lightly and brushed it off. Is that so? Nearby, Kakashi noticed Neji's serious demeanor and interjected, Guy, stop chatting and hurry up with your order. The shopkeeper's been waiting. Without overthinking, Guy began ordering food. Kakashi turned to Yuru. Let's eat quickly. Yuru understood what Kakashi was worried about. Neji, with his Byakugan, could easily detect the enormous and extraordinary chakra stored within Yoru's body if he decided to investigate. Nodding, Yuru quickly finished off 3 bowls of ramen. Afterward, Kakashi led him out of the Akiraku ramen shop, leaving Guy behind. However, Neji's curiosity about Yuru was piqued. Unlike anyone else his age, Yuru radiated a tangible sense of threat that Neji couldn't ignore. As they strolled through the streets after leaving Akiraku, Kakashi broke the silence. Neji noticed you earlier. Did you feel it? Yuru nodded. He was focused on me the whole time. It was unusual. Kakashi sighed. Neji was the top student in his class last year, and with the Byakugan, his perception is unparalleled. Over the past year, his strength has already reached Chunin level. His instincts as a ninja are sharp. Yuru nodded in agreement. I've heard about him before. He was pretty famous back when I was in the academy. Yuru had attended the same academy as Neji for 5 years, though Neji was a year older. The Ninja Academy was a 6-year program, and during that time, Yuru's mediocrity, and his deliberate attempts to stay low-key, meant he'd never caught Neji's attention. Kakashi looked at Yuru seriously. If he ever finds out about the immense chakra within you, it'll be trouble. Guy can't keep a secret to save his life, and it's one of the reasons the 3rd Hokage didn't allow him into the Anbu. Guy excelled at direct, straightforward missions but wasn't suited for operations requiring discretion or secrecy. Yuru nodded. I can sense that. But honestly, your rush to leave might have made it even more obvious. Neji would have found it hard not to notice. Kakashi sighed. I know, but if we stayed any longer, I was afraid Neji might activate his Byakugan. Yuru chuckled. Even if he finds out, I don't think it'll be a big deal. Given Neji's personality, I doubt he'd casually spill the secret. Kakashi considered this for a moment and nodded. True, he's not the type. Still, it's better to be cautious. Soon, the two arrived at a serene lake beneath a waterfall in Hidden Leaf Village's back mountains. Standing by the lakeside, Kakashi faced Yuru with a serious expression. I have 2 training plans in mind. I'll let you decide which one you want to follow. Yuru met his gaze. Please, tell me. The first option is for me to teach you a high-level ninjutsu right away, dramatically boosting your current strength. The second option is a gradual approach, starting with basic ninjutsu and progressively increasing the difficulty. After laying out the options, Kakashi silently observed Yoru's reaction. Yuru contemplated briefly before replying calmly, I'll choose the first option. He expected Kakashi to disapprove, but to his surprise, Kakashi wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled. I figured as much. I knew you'd pick the first option. Honestly, I wanted you to choose it too. You're not like ordinary people. Following a standard path might do you more harm than good. Chapter 25 Kakashi patted Yuru on the shoulder before turning to walk toward the lakeside. Do you think it's just because of my Sharingan that I've managed to gain a reputation in the ninja world? Yuru followed and stood beside him, gazing at the water. Aside from the Sharingan, you must have a powerful jutsu that complements it, right? After all, you're a Jonin. It's impossible for you not to have a trump card. Kakashi smiled at Yuru. You're right. I developed a jutsu that, without the Sharingan, was incredibly dangerous to use. But with the Sharingan, it became a highly lethal technique. He recalled the time when he first created Chidori. Without the Sharingan to assist, the jutsu was risky to the point of being life-threatening. A single mistake could have led to his defeat, or worse, death. Kakashi sighed. If it weren't for a friend transplanting this Sharingan to me, I wouldn't have reached where I am today. Though the Sharingan drained a significant amount of Kakashi's chakra, it undeniably elevated his capabilities. His natural talent in combat compensated for the chakra cost, and as long as he managed his chakra carefully, the Sharingan was a considerable asset. Yuru silently observed Kakashi, who assumed the boy was curious about the origin of his Sharingan. Want to know who gave me this eye? Kakashi asked with a small smile. Normally, he wouldn't divulge such personal information, but he had already decided to take Yuru as his disciple. In some ways, he valued Yuru even more than Sasuke and Naruto. Yuru blinked in surprise. In truth, he'd simply been lost in thought. But since Kakashi had misinterpreted his expression, Yuru decided to play along and nodded. I am curious. Kakashi sat by the lakeside and gestured for Yuru to join him. Once Yuru sat down, Kakashi began. After I graduated from the academy, I was so young that I struggled to get along with my teammates. It wasn't until the classmates who entered the academy with me also graduated that I finally joined a functional team. In a way, I didn't really graduate early after all. He added with a wry smile. Yuru listened attentively. He had assumed Kakashi would dive straight into teaching jutsu but was surprised by the personal story. Still, it was a sign of Kakashi's trust in him. This eye, Kakashi continued, was a gift from my friend, Obito Uchiha. He then recounted the events with Obito and Rin, sharing the full story with Yuru. Although Yuru had known bits and pieces before, this was the first time he heard the details. This is Obito's legacy, and it has helped me immensely. Kakashi concluded. Yuru maintained a calm expression, but inwardly he thought, if Kakashi knew what Obito is up to now, he'd probably find what he just said incredibly awkward. After finishing his story, Kakashi turned to Yuru with a serious expression. I hope you'll take care of and cherish your friends in the future. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Losing a friend is one of the most painful things you can experience. His tone carried genuine sincerity. Kakashi truly hoped that Yuru wouldn't have to experience the same pain he did. Yuru didn't reply, only nodded silently. Kakashi stood up. Alright, let's not dwell on sad things. Do you know why I decided to teach you Chidori? Without a Sharingan, this jutsu is extremely dangerous. Kakashi looked at Yuru, curious to see if he understood his reasoning. Yuru thought for a moment before responding, you believe my dynamic vision is strong? Strong enough to rival the Sharingan? Kakashi chuckled and patted Yuru on the shoulder. Exactly. When I tested you last night, I noticed that your dynamic vision is exceptionally sharp. In fact, it surpasses that of an ordinary Sharingan. Chidori is a jutsu that requires high-speed movement and exceptional dynamic vision. You're more than capable of handling it. Yuru nodded. Still, I imagine this jutsu isn't easy to master. Correct. The learning difficulty of this jutsu is classified as A rank. Without strong dynamic vision, its difficulty rises to S rank. Before learning it, one must refine their body movement to an exceptional level. Additionally, this jutsu consumes a significant amount of chakra, though that's not a problem for you. Your chakra reserves are already at the level of a Jonin. With your chakra, you could use Chidori up to 10 times a day. I can use it 20 times a day, meaning your chakra reserves are about half of mine. Kakashi was unaware that Yoru's chakra reserves had increased even further. However, the chakra consumption of Chidori was still less than that of Rikiri. The learning difficulty also varied. Chidori was A rank, while Rai Hidden Mist Village was S rank. Currently, Kakashi could only use Rai Hidden Mist Village 4 times a day, which spoke volumes about its chakra consumption. Yoru listened intently without interrupting, absorbing every word. Kakashi nodded in satisfaction. Yoru's attitude toward learning greatly impressed him. Although Chidori has higher requirements, you already meet all of them: dynamic vision, physical fitness, and chakra reserves. You're more than qualified. There's no need for additional training in those areas. I can start teaching you Chidori directly. I'll explain the principles of Chidori to you now. Once you've mastered it, I'll teach you the advanced version, Rikiri. Kakashi had high expectations for Yoru. He didn't believe Yoru would take long to learn Chidori, so he went ahead and mentioned the next step. After speaking, Kakashi began explaining the principles of Chidori. Compared to standard ninjutsu, Chidori was undeniably complex. As expected from a jutsu Kakashi had developed himself. Most people would struggle to understand it, let alone master it. After 10 minutes of explanation, Kakashi glanced at Yoru. He didn't expect Yoru to understand everything on the first try. If it's unclear, I can explain it again. This jutsu is complicated, so it's normal not to grasp it immediately. Yoru nodded. I understood. To prevent Kakashi from doubting him, Yoru dissected the principles of Chidori and explained them back in detail, demonstrating a deep comprehension of the jutsu. Anyone listening would have thought he'd already mastered it for years. Yoru truly understood it on the first explanation. His cognitive abilities had increased exponentially, especially in the realm of ninjutsu. Kakashi was stunned. If I hadn't known I'd never taught you before, I'd think you'd been practicing this jutsu for decades. You're unbelievably familiar with it. Chapter 26. Yoru smiled faintly. Maybe I just have a natural interest in this kind of jutsu, so I understand it a bit better. Kakashi, of course, didn't believe him. After all, Chidori had an A-rank difficulty level, not just any ordinary A rank, either. Lightning-style jutsu was inherently more challenging to learn compared to other chakra natures. When Kakashi developed Chidori, he had been quite young, and the theories behind it were exceedingly complex. Even for him, mastering the concept back then wasn't easy. Yet Yoru not only understood it after one explanation but also displayed a detailed familiarity with its intricacies. He even managed to simplify some of the steps. Such an ability couldn't be explained by just having a bit better understanding. Still, Kakashi felt pleased. Yoru was like an unfathomable treasure trove, always full of surprises. Snapping out of his thoughts, Kakashi said, I'll demonstrate how to execute this jutsu step by step. Pay close attention. This jutsu is extremely dangerous, even a small mistake could lead to serious consequences. Yoru nodded. He was fully aware of the dangers of this jutsu. After all, it was A rank. Kakashi walked over to a massive boulder, over 2 meters tall. The rocks by the lake were known for their hardness, making them difficult to break. Standing in front of the boulder, Kakashi's gaze sharpened, and his hand formed a claw-like shape. Chakra instantly gathered in his palm. Z crackle. In an instant, blue arcs of electricity danced around Kakashi's hand. The chakra condensed into a tangible form, the arcs of electricity growing more intense with each passing moment. Soon, the lightning transformed into writhing serpents of energy, crackling loudly. The sheer force of the arcs turned the leaves around Kakashi into ash. It was as if Kakashi had become one with the lightning itself. The arcs of electricity, writhing like captured serpents, radiated an aura of destruction. Standing nearby, Yuru was stunned. Since arriving in this world, he had never witnessed such a terrifying jutsu. The true power of Chidori far surpassed his expectations. The intense lightning illuminated the area for tens of meters, and even though Yuru stood over 10 meters away, his hair bristled, and goosebumps ran down his skin. Swallowing hard, Yuru stared at the fearsome scene. For the first time, he truly felt the power of an elite Jonin. And all of this had happened in the blink of an eye. Kakashi had condensed the lightning instantaneously. The piercing sound was like the cries of thousands of birds, yet far more menacing. Lightning style, Chidori. Crack. Boom. With a low murmur, Kakashi turned into a blur, a streak of light flashing by. In a heartbeat, he reappeared dozens of meters away, leaving the boulder in front of him shattered into fragments. Shards of stone flew everywhere, and the deafening sound of the explosion echoed through the canyon. The previously calm lake now rippled with waves. Yuru stood frozen, having instinctively leapt back dozens of meters. Yet even at that distance, he could still feel the overwhelming destructive power of the jutsu. So terrifying. Is this the power of a Ni-rank jutsu? It's unbelievable that a 12-year-old boy created something like this. Yuru finally understood the true genius of Kakashi. To develop such a fearsome jutsu at just 12 years old was a testament to his extraordinary talent. After releasing Chidori, Kakashi stood up and shook his hand, looking at Yuru standing dozens of meters away. He smiled. You're quick on your feet. So, did you understand it? Want me to demonstrate again? Kakashi had grown accustomed to the destructive power of this jutsu. Yuru, however, was still in shock. The sheer force was far beyond what he had imagined. The destructive radius of Chidori easily spanned tens of meters, with the aftermath alone being enough to devastate the area. To be hit directly by the core of the attack would be utterly hopeless. It wasn't hard to imagine that most people struck by this jutsu would end up with their bodies shredded into fragments. Snapping out of his daze, Yuru leapt down from the tree. To avoid being caught in the aftermath earlier, he had used the body flicker jutsu to retreat to a distant tree the moment Kakashi launched his attack. Looking at the shattered remnants of the boulder, Yuru couldn't help but exclaim, this jutsu's power is almost absurdly terrifying. That's also why it consumes a tremendous amount of chakra. Kakashi explained. For an average Chunin, using it even once would likely deplete all their chakra. Yuru nodded in agreement. How about it? Kakashi asked. Do you have any insights yet? Yuru closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them again, and a gleam of understanding flashed through. Although this jutsu was complex, Yuru already knew how to execute it. He nodded at Kakashi, who blinked in surprise before giving a wry smile. Well, I suppose what's difficult for others might not be so hard for you. For today, focus on practicing this jutsu. If you have any questions, ask me. Kakashi walked to the side and leaned against a tree, keeping a close eye on Yuru. He wanted to see if Yuru could master Chidori in a single night. Yuru, for his part, wasn't entirely sure. But he felt as though he had already grasped all the key points of the technique. In fact, there was a strange familiarity, almost as if he'd mastered this jutsu for decades. Still, Yuru kept that to himself, dismissing it as a mere illusion. Standing before another large boulder, Yuru began channeling chakra into his right hand. In an instant, chakra surged from within his body, condensing into his palm. Suddenly, there was a sharp cracking sound. Z crackle. Dozens of thick arcs of lightning coiled around Yuru, each as thick as a human arm, far larger than what Kakashi had demonstrated earlier. The lightning Kakashi had summoned was about the thickness of chopsticks, but Yoru's arcs were massive in comparison. Even more strikingly, the lightning wasn't the usual blue, it was golden. Kakashi, observing from a short distance away, was stunned. What's going on? How is Yuru producing this kind of chakra? Yoru's chakra was entirely different from that of an ordinary ninja. For most, tangible chakra would manifest as blue. But Yoru's chakra was golden, and so when it transformed into lightning, it retained that golden hue. What was even more astonishing was the quietness of Yoru's Chidori. Rather than the usual sharp screeching sound, the golden lightning emitted only a faint crackling. Even stranger, the golden arcs of lightning seemed almost alive, slithering around Yoru like giant serpents at incredible speed. Yoru himself was unaware of how different his Chidori was from Kakashi's. His entire focus was locked on the massive boulder a few meters in front of him. Chapter 27. After completing the formation of the jutsu, a glimmer of light flashed in Yoru's eyes. Lightning style, Chidori. Crack, bang, boom. The moment Yoru launched the attack, it was as if a meteor had collided with a planet. The surrounding area for hundreds of meters trembled violently. At the epicenter of the explosion, a blinding light illuminated the area for several kilometers as if it were broad daylight. Countless golden lightning arcs connected the heavens and the earth, transforming the space within hundreds of meters around Yoru into a sea of lightning. The terrifying energy was apocalyptic in magnitude. For 10 full seconds, the golden lightning raged on. During those 10 seconds, the forested mountains behind Hidden Leaf Village resembled a scene struck by a high-intensity tail beast bomb. The ground shook, mountains crumbled, and everything within several hundred meters of Yoru's attack zone was utterly obliterated. It was horrifying. When the lightning finally dispersed, all that was left was a crater hundreds of meters wide and dozens of meters deep. At the center of the crater, Yoru lay motionless. After about 10 seconds, Kakashi appeared beside him, picked him up, and disappeared from the site. If they didn't leave immediately, it wouldn't be long before Yoru found himself in prison. Sure enough, a minute later, several ninja wearing animal masks arrived at the edge of the crater. They were members of the Anbu,